Good afternoon. My name is Ethan Collier, and I'll chair today's meeting of the Chattanooga-Hamilton County Regional Planning Commission. I do want to go over a couple logistical things before we get started. The Planning Commission has received this packet in the mail about a week ago and has had the opportunity to review it. And hopefully there's an agenda floating around out there. Can somebody just hold up a copy of the agenda so I know it's out there? Nobody has a copy. Here we go. Okay, so follow on closely on the agenda because at times we move pretty quickly. I'll read case numbers and typically read an address so that you can follow along. In some cases, if there's no opposition and the Planning Commission so chooses, we'll actually take action on a case without hearing from staff or the applicant necessarily. So at times it moves really fast, but most of the time it moves really slow. So the procedures are pretty simple. In each case, I'll read off a case number and I'll ask if there's any opposition present. If you're here and you want to speak and you're not the applicant, you're opposition. So you may not necessarily think of yourself as opposition. You may just have some questions or you may have some concerns, but the word I use for that individual is opposition. That's what we've called it here for the last 15 years. So I'll ask if there's any opposition here. If you want to speak in regards to that case, make sure you raise your hand. And then I'll ask if the applicant's present. The applicant will get to come up first and they'll have 7 minutes to present their case. And then if you're here and you're in opposition and you want to speak, it's really super important you get out of your chair and you come up and line up on the right side of the room. And one by one, you'll come up to the mic and talk. But it's really important you all get up and line up on that side of the room so that I can see if there's 3 people that want to speak, I can make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to speak. We'll hear from the opposition for 9 minutes on the case. Then the applicant will have 2 minutes to respond to any questions or concerns that the opposition has raised. And then the Planning Commission will take action. I'll also add that all the conversation that takes place today will be between the person standing at that mic. There's a little red light on it. They'll introduce themselves. They'll state their name and address when you come up to the mic. All the conversation that takes place today will be between the Planning Commission and the person at the microphone and the Planning Commission and staff. So there's really no conversation that takes place between the person at the microphone and staff or the person at the microphone and the folks that are here to watch. So with that, I think we can get started. Everybody's in the room?
Yes, for once, everybody's in the room.
Okay.
And everybody's at the dais today.
Okay,
It's a good
fantastic. We've been doing all this social distancing stuff and it's made life pretty difficult. So, all right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Brian, before we do, are there any cases that have been withdrawn that I don't know about?
Not withdrawn. We do have under old business, case number 2, which is 2022-0002. They wish to defer 60 days. The applicant's representative should be here. He may have stepped out for court, but he is requesting 30 days. I did receive opposition. If you'll allow time to speak for about 2 minutes since they came today.
Okay.
60.
All right. So in regards to the first case under variances, SD 2022-0002, we have some opposition present. Can you raise your hand? Okay. So the applicant has asked to.
I think they're on the wrong case. You're on the subdivision variance. I believe they're in opposition to the 7624 Uttawa Georgetown Road.
Okay.
You're on a subdivision variance, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So you're not here in opposition. Is anybody in opposition to that first case under variances on our agenda?
We did receive an email in opposition. If you'd like me to read it into the record.
Yes, please.
My name
is it short?
It's short. My name is Joseph Morrison, and I reside at 4533 West Hasler Road. Due to my work schedule, he was not able to attend today, so I'm writing to speak against the variance request. Sally Moses has requested the variance for multiple lots and drives, not including what she is proposing. There's already too many vehicles on the small 1-lane drive, and we definitely do not need any more than what we already have. There are 5 drives, not including what she has proposed. I lived with my residents for 41 years plus. I think my voice should be considered in this matter and request be denied. Thank you for your time and understanding. We also have another applicant who's sent in, just he couldn't be here either, who's opposed to it.
Okay. Is that? We have a motion to approve with conditions. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is SD 2022-0003, and this is located at 2505 North Wilder Street. It has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chairman, we did also receive a letter in opposition to this. It's basically the same as the previous email about too many houses in this general area, too many lots, and traffic on North Wilder Street will be a negative impact.
Okay. Is this person an engineer or anything like that?
It doesn't state. Name is Treva Ritchie.
They just are a concerned resident.
Yeah, they've lived in the area for almost 50 years. Just concerned with the number of homes that will be built on this driveway
Okay.
or section.
Okay, thank you. We do have a staff recommendation to approve. We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda, it's item 3, and it's under preliminary plats. It's SD 2022-0004, and it's lots 15 through 34 of 0 Equestrian Drive. It has staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve. It has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. First item under old business is 2021-0219, and this is located at 6340 Middle Valley Road. And it's an application to lift conditions and has a staff recommendation to amend condition number 1 and lift condition number 2 of the ordinance. Is there any opposition present? You're here in opposition. And is the applicant present? All right.
Mr. Chairman, we did receive opposition, an opposition petition. You should have that in front of you in your Google spreadsheet.
Yeah. Brian, I for one wasn't here. Was this on last month's agenda?
I believe this was November, but
Oh,
I'll be glad to go through it again. It was deferred last month
Okay.
or in December.
Okay. Could you go through it again?
Sure. This is case 2021-219. It's currently zoned RT1. The request is to lift conditions number 1 and number 2 of ordinance 13607 for a proposed townhouse project and single family dwellings. The conditions that are on this piece of property are 2. You can see the ordinance number 13607. Condition number 1, which is they're asking to lift, is a maximum of 4 dwelling units per acre. And condition number 2 is townhome uses only on parcel 091-08401 only. So this map on the right-hand side is the zoning map, the one that's highlighted in the blue. That condition limits townhouse uses only on that parcel. Parcel 82, which is below this one, has no conditions other than the number of units per acre. This case became before Planning Commission in 2020. Staff recommended to approve with 2 conditions, a maximum of 4 dwelling units per acre, and townhome uses only on parcel 91-8401 only. Planning Commission, there was opposition at the meeting. Planning Commission went a different direction and recommended to approve with a maximum of 12 dwelling units per acre. At council, there was still opposition. Council went a different direction than Planning Commission. Planning Commission followed the staff recommendation, which is a maximum of 4 dwelling units per acre, and townhome uses only on parcel 091-08401. And that equals, it's about 2 acres in size. At the time, there are 12 units, and that's a density of 6. There is some adjacent zoning history. In 1984, to the north of this property, at the corner of Shelby Circle and Miller Valley Road. That was rezoned to R4 special zone from R1. Then with the green arrow, that request was in 2019, the rezone R1 to R4. Planning Commission and staff recommended to approve with conditions. Ultimately, it was drawn. The application was withdrawn at City Council. Here's an aerial view of the property. Again, it's located at 6340 Middle Valley Road. It's about 375 feet to the south of Lower Mill Road and Shelby Circle. Here's a view of the site. This is a view of north of the site, which is along Shelby Circle, some of the townhomes that are existing on Shelby Circle. This is an example of adjacent single-family dwellings. This property is in the Hickson North River Community Plan, which was adopted in 2005, and the plan recommendation is low-density residential, which is typically single-family dwellings of the dominant use. It does allow two-family dwellings and patio homes and townhomes, and it has a density limitation typically between 1 to 5 dwellings per acre. On this request to lift the conditions, staff recommends to approve lifting condition 1 to approved to amend condition number 1 from 4 dwelling units per acre to a maximum density of 5.5 dwelling units per acre, and approved to lift condition number 2. The reasoning is that single-family attached residential dwelling, townhome development, is a housing type that is compatible with the recommended land use plan, and which is the Hickson North River Plan. The request would be compatible with adjacent land uses and development reform. And in order to provide an adequate transition from the R4 zone to the west of the site and the R1 zone to the south of the site, conditions limiting density should be applied. So staff recommends to amend condition number 1 and lift condition number 2. Staff also received some conditions by the applicant through a neighborhood meeting. Those conditions the applicant submitted for review is number of units limited to a total of 11 dwelling units, which equals 5.5 dwelling units per acre, which is what staff's recommending. And the second condition the applicant wishes to propose is no access to be provided from 6340 Middle Valley Road, which is tax map 091, parcels 8401 and 82 to 1514 Shelby Circle, which is tax map 91M D 00205. So this comes to you from staff. Will recommend to amend condition number 1, lift condition number 2. And again, these 2 conditions on the screen are additional conditions supplied by the applicant.
Mr. Schultz, does staff have an opinion on those conditions?
On the applicant conditions, that number 1 condition is exactly like what we're proposing. Right. It equals the same.
What about the second?
Second, I don't think staff has any problems with adding that condition. So okay. Staff would be acceptable to those conditions.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Brian, what is the density change from the conditions placed at council by Vice Chairman Smith versus what's being requested today?
From 4 to 5.5. Okay. So basically 8 units to 11 units.
8 to 11.
This also includes 3 single-family dwellings. So the previous plan was all townhome development. So if I have that site plan, I do not. Yeah, here it is. This is the site plan submitted when it went to front of council. You can see it's all townhomes, and then the parcel to the east where the applicant's now showing single-family dwellings, which are 3. This applicant at the time showed a dog daycare or dog park. Again, the site plans are not, he's not held this site plan.
Okay. Brian, did the applicant state what usually I asked why, when we're under a lift conditions, if something changed to trigger the request?
He did not us.
Okay.
He's here today.
I'll be glad to ask. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant first? You can come on up. Your mic's on.
Yeah, I'm Barry Evans representing Jesse Graham. And before I forget to address your question, Mr. Ledford, the original layout for this had all the residential on the one piece of land. It did not address the other 2 parcels, which are about the equivalent. So there were not to be any townhomes on that. And that's because the applicant, that was her first go at trying to do anything like this. And she didn't know what she was going to do with the rest of it. So that the other two parcels were not addressed. I did meet with the homeowners association after understanding there was some concern about what was going on there. And I believe we had, if not unanimous, very close. Greg Martin also attended the meeting and can give you any details on that. But the main concerns of the neighborhood were that they were concerned in that we were lifting conditions, that we were seeking an unlimited amount or who knows what amount of homes, townhomes on that property. And we are in clear alignment with them to leave it strictly at 11 and had asked in a letter what we needed to do to make sure that it was not going to be any more than 11. Apparently what we're doing limits it strictly to 11 with a 5.5 per acre. The other part that was a more concern, I believe, or equal concern, was the access to Shelby Circle. There's great concern, and I live in the neighborhood there too. So I had equal concern about more traffic there on Shelby Circle and creating another opportunity on some of the other adjacent lots to create this mega community that really would not be in the best interest of the community. So we were in 100% agreement on restricting any access to any of the adjacent lots to Shelby Circle, because that's not what we're looking for. I don't think it will be a benefit to the community that we're trying to build as well. And along with that, we had requested, I don't see it here, but we had also requested the ability to make this a private road, because in what has already been established, it was like it could go either way. So we are requesting to strictly make this a private road, so there for the security of the homeowners that will be buying here, but also to further secure Valley Brook and Winbrook from anything here.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Evans, so just to repeat the question for the record, the reason for lift conditions, there's always a why, is because originally when this application was made and came through the process, the applicant or landowner did not know what they wanted to build, and now they do after the zoning was passed and went through a process of community meetings and all the way through city council.
That was actually a previous owner. I mean, actually, that was an applicant who was in the process of buying the property. That sale did not go through. So this is a separate buyer, owner that is dealing with this.
So, and the reason I bring that up is because, and we just talked about this in our meeting before, we are one of 2 counties in the state of Tennessee that allows conditional zoning. And when those conditions come down, they usually, or they're always arrive at a process that builds trust with the community. And everyone spends a lot of time, and the council rep or the county commission representative goes through the process. And that was rezoned at city council, where it will land again with Vice Chairman Smith to make the decision. And I think it's, quite frankly, it's a bit unfair to drag the public back through this process. And I think it sets a precedence for distrust in such a short time frame, because someone's for whatever reason. I understand that projects fall through, I understand agreements are not met or sales do not happen. But there's a lengthy process that a lot of people put a lot of time and energy into. I did speak with the vice chairman about this. He is not in favor of reducing the density, because that community meeting means everything to him, as it does me. That is a very critical component. And so my inclination is to vote no, because I know what's going to happen at city council. So my offer to you is, would you consider a little more time to involve the city council representative for that area and the community to gain more information and maybe more of a collaborative effort moving forward?
if I don't have any choice at this time, but we've been delayed. And again, I believe Greg could address, the president of the association did agree with what we were asking, with what we were doing. So I'm surprised. That's the first I've heard there was any.
And I understand it. And I also heard that, but I also heard from the council representative of the area who will make that final decision at council that that meeting did not go very well. So I'm getting conflicting information, which is why I'm trying to allow some time and opportunity, because I understand from the land use perspective, I can see why staff recommended for the approval. But I think what it boils down to was the density for the vice chairman. And, moving, even if it passed today, it will go on to council with a recommendation for approval if it were to pass today. But I just want you to know what the thoughts are when it lands at council.
Yeah. Greg, if you would, they did vote while we were there and asked for a raise of hands. And am I not mistaken that the community was in favor of this project? When they took the vote, there was a majority of the, if not all of the people in the room raised their hand in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Is it okay for me to speak, Mr. Chairman? I did go to a meeting last month with the neighborhood association. I believe there were other people besides the folks at Valley Brook that were there from some of the other surrounding neighborhoods. I don't remember a vote because I don't know that it was a democratic place where you're going to have votes that are recorded. But we tried to get some understanding of what was being proposed and how it was going to impact it. And I really have a question, Mr. Chairman, for staff. When this was put conditions on it 16 months ago in the city council, was it for this entire 3 parcels that we're looking at, or was it just for part of it?
It depends. Condition number 1 applies
That's
to
a great
the entire,
political answer.
well, number 1 applies to the entirety of the property, all 3 parcels, because it doesn't specifically call out the tax map and parcel number. Now, condition number 2 says townhome uses allowed on parcel 91-8401, which is on the screen highlighted. Let me go back to that here. Condition number 2 only applies to the area highlighted in blue. Now, depending on how you interpret the reading of condition number 2, does that mean parcel 82 cannot be used for anything? Or can it be used for all the uses that are allowed in RT1, which is single family and townhomes? Depending how codes enforcement interprets that condition, the way it's written.
So just for my understanding, Mr. Schultz, what you're saying is the part that's highlighted in blue can only be townhomes.
Correct.
But the 82, that 1.1 acres, that can be townhomes or single family.
Based on that zone.
Right. And when the city council, and I'll ask you instead of deferring to Mr. Ledford, but feel free to chime in. When the city council voted on that, were they voting on the 84 in blue, or were they voting on the whole parcel to say that it's limited to townhomes, or is it just the density?
They were voting on the entirety of the 8401 and 82.
Okay. Well, and I want to hear from opposition, Mr. Chairman, but I think at the end of the day, from the meeting that Mr. Evans referenced, that it was a good meeting in January. It really was, in the sense that it was families and folks in the neighborhood meeting and coming together and having discussion. It was open and honest, and it was something that people were just trying to get their minds together and say, let's get on the same page. And so in that sense, it was a positive type of meeting on a Sunday afternoon. And, you always love that when you go to those things to see problems get solved and people get on the same page, and maybe where they misunderstood or they didn't misunderstand. And that's really what I took away from that. But I don't disagree with Councilman Ledford's narrative that when the city council votes on something 16 months ago, and then they want to change it 16 months later,
It's one of those things where you just got to ask why. Why do we want to change things 16 months later? So I have problems with that. And I think that's a point well taken. But Mr. Chairman, I would defer that we would hear the opposition and hear what they have to say about this. I think that could be beneficial to us.
Thank you. We do have some folks here in opposition. If you would, if you wish to speak, is there just going to be one of you speaking?
I believe so.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr.
That's
Chairman. I'm Craig Allen. I'm a resident of Valley Brook, but I'm also the attorney for the Valley Brook Homeowners Association. And I will start off by
if I
saying,
could we get your address?
307 Valley Brook Road,
Thank you.
Dixon. Start off by saying that, let me address this meeting issue Councilman Ledford mentioned. I thought it was a very good meeting. I'm not sure where the negative inference came from a councilman who wasn't there. I will say that the only negative part of that meeting had to do with stormwater. And there's a lot of discussion and criticism about what stormwater effect might have. But of course, that's apples and oranges for what we're here today. We tried to explain at the meeting that would be an engineering decision that would have to come down the line after zoning was approved, if it is approved. So other than that, I thought it was a very congenial meeting, and I don't recall any vote being taken, as Mr. Evans said, but I do agree that there was consensus that we were all in favor of this development, particularly with respect to the desire to have 8 townhomes and 3 single residences as shown on there. I don't think any of us agreed to that, disagreed with that, and to the extent that that would require increased density, the homeowner association does not contest and does not disagree with that. The one thing that is troubling, and I'll admit this isn't my bailiwick, but as I understand it, so the first issue is condition 1 being in effect for that lot 84, is that right? Townhome zone. We got absolutely no objection to that whatsoever. The other one, though, amend condition 2 to remove any conditions on the other lot. We don't understand what that would. If you remove that condition, what is there? Does it revert to R1, or should we amend it to remove the townhome only condition on that tract and revert that to R1? So it is only single residential home. So we don't have a chance of something else going in there. But other than that, we are in agreement. We welcome these neighbors. We do very much have a concern about additional traffic in a right of way going to, or an easement going to Shelby Circle. But again, I don't think that's something that's on your plate today. So to that extent, we are in favor of this proposal. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
For the opposition.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Ledford.
Thank you, Commissioner Howell. I would recommend highly to share these sentiments with Councilman Smith before our planning and zoning committee meeting next month. I think it's very good to reach out to him and let him know, because I do know that when it comes to conditions placed at council, we take that very seriously, and it is a matter of public trust. But I would love for you to reach out to him and let him know, and I will advise him as well tomorrow when I see him of the comments that were made here today. Thank you.
We'll be happy to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Allen.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Holland.
Mr. Allen, we did receive a petition, and the petition was from the adjacent property owners. I understand that Valley Brook, representing Valley Brook Neighborhood Association, the neighborhood association may speak to say that they're okay with the conditions being lifted, but we have a petition of some 20 adjacent property owners who have petitioned against the increasing the density of all of the parcels. From
I will say we haven't seen that. That's news to me. First I've heard of this today. So I don't know if the panel wants to defer this again. Let us look at that, talk to people. I don't know who the neighbors are, where they are. Exactly. I understand that maybe staff can know when we're talking about increasing the density, we're going from what? How many to 11? 8 to 11? Is it 3 more?
Mr. Chairman, you want me to answer that?
please.
Yeah, based on the previous condition of 4 dwelling units per acre at 2 acres, he could do 8 townhomes. As the condition stands today, if that condition is amended or removed, it would go to, I think, 11 units with a density of 5.5.
Okay, so, and his proposal is to do 8 townhomes and 3 single-family residences.
That is correct.
Well, again, I'm sorry, we're not privy to that petition.
Yeah, and Brian, you may be able to speak to how the planning commission receives that.
Yes, we get opposition emails from citizens, and this petition, I'm not sure who it came from or who it is from, but it has some 20-something signatures on it. We're glad to share it with you. It seems like they're coming from Westgate Road, Masters Road.
Shelby Circle.
It's like a lot on Masters Road.
Shelby Circle, Masters
The
Road,
Shelby Circle Masters.
Westgate.
So I'm not sure who put this
And
together.
again, I think that would be for the applicant to deal with those people. If there's an issue, I fully suspect that has to do with the stormwater and drainage issues that were raised. That would be my guess, that a lot of those people do that. Maybe they're mixing apples with oranges, but in any event, we'll let the planning commission deem what it needs to do. Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant, you're welcome to come back up. You have 2 minutes to respond to.
Again, I just would like to remind you that the townhomes that were there, that is not changing. That will remain 8, but that only addressed that one piece. And if you look at that, we're talking about 2 pieces there that combine almost double where the townhomes are sitting. So we're asking to put 3 single-family homes on on 2 parcels that are about twice the size of where the 8 townhomes are going. So that was all. So if we're approved here today, then if there's any resistance, there will be a chance for Councilman Smith to address it, and I can speak with him in the meantime. Is that correct?
May I, Chairman?
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, sir, Mr. Evans. That's why I was trying to work with you on maybe a deferral to give you the time to have further discussion. So this will land next month in the Planning and Zoning Committee, which I chair. And then the week following that meeting will be the first reading if the chairman wishes, and there's no deferral motion made. So up until between now and then, there's about approximately a month. Before committee, 3 weeks for you to have conversation, further conversation and dialogue. I'm a little concerned seeing 21 petition line items on record. I think that's something to pause for question. And that's why I was trying to present the option of maybe a deferral to work that out. But if you think that can be worked out in the next 3 weeks, then I will leave that up to you, sir.
Yeah, I will meet with him or make a phone call to him to see what the reservations are.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman.
Question. Mr. Evans, I think what I'm hearing from Mr. Ledford is that unless this is, and I don't put words in your mouth, Commissioner, Councilman, but unless this is something that urgent that needs to get done, if once it leaves this dock and it goes to city council, then the ship is sailing and they've got to deal with it at that time. Whereas if we slow the train down and defer, there's an opportunity to talk to the councilman, Smith. There's an opportunity to have conversations with these 20 people that have got concerns outside of the other folks that are here. And that may be in your advantage to be able to have the boat not leave this dock and head to the next one. And so that's why I think it's your choice.
Okay.
But I think a deferral is probably in your best interest unless money's burning on a table somewhere and you got to put the fire extinguisher out. And I get that too. So it's your choice. And I think that's what I'm really kind of hearing.
I'll trust your judgment and defer.
Then I would make a motion that we defer 30 days. We have a motion to defer for 30 days and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? I have one question before we vote on that.
do we make available to people like Mr. Evans, the folks that have contacted us and those 20 emails? Do we do that or not really?
I don't know. Brian?
No, only if he asks, we can share it with him.
Okay. I
We
didn't
have no
know.
way to know. Sometimes the applicants will ask because they're opposition. We send it to them, but not all the time.
Okay. I wondered if, because what we're talking about here is making sure we're communicating, we're all on the same page. That's what that Sunday afternoon meeting was in January that Mr. Smith was not able to be at because he was out of town. And I think that's what we're trying to do is, in the words of the good book, come now, let us reason together. And I think that's what we're really trying to do here. And I think by deferring this 30 days, it's going to be helpful for Mr. Evans and for the neighborhood.
Thank you for asking, but I have no way of communicating. Everyone received the invitation for the meeting, so I'm not sure. Anyway, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. We do have a motion to defer for 30 days, and it was properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0002, and it's located at 7624 Uttawa, Georgetown Road. And it is an application to rezone from A1 to C2, and it has a staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present? All right, and you're the applicant, I'm assuming?
Applicant, which is Brandon and Throckmorton and his wife. But we have, as Mr. Schultz indicated earlier, requested a 60-day deferral.
Second. We have a motion to defer for 60 days. And it has been properly seconded. I'm just going to say that this whole thing makes me incredibly irritable. So I'm going to talk slow, but this is old business because it's been deferred before, along with this last case. I wasn't here last month, so I don't know if maybe these are older than that. But I mean, we're not deferring these cases again. If I have anything to do about it, and that applies to the last case too, and I understand they've left, but I'm gonna get unirritable just as quick as I got irritable. But when we're deferring cases that are old business, something's going wrong somewhere, and if it's up here, fine.
Mr. Chairman, opposition did request if they can, up to you, if they could speak since they're taking time out to be here today.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll hear from opposition. Thank you.
I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. My name is Jerry Bales. I live at 7625 Uttawa, Georgetown Road, right across the street from the property in question. First off, I would like to say your frustration and mine is equally the same. These people that are here are taking off from work that did last month, again this month, and I'm retired, it doesn't affect me. But for them to have to take off from work and be here, and this thing continues to go on and on. I have a petition that I personally got myself, that this property completely surrounds this piece of property, the residents, some 25 names. Be glad to leave this with you, of the people in opposition. No one, not one person refused to sign this that I talked to. And this morning, late this morning, we get a text from the attorney here that requested another 60-day delay. This is that these people have already taken off from work. They didn't have an opportunity to make that decision till after this email came. So we would like this thing to end. To keep coming back here time and time again is very frustrating. And with that, I'm open to any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a question.
Commissioner Martin.
Yeah, and my question is really for the attorney that was represented is, I think this is a little different than the last case because of not communicating with the councilman and those kinds of things. But my question, I'm curious, why do you want to delay it 60 days? This gentleman behind you. Yes, sir.
Yes.
There's two dynamics at play. One is there have been substantial communications. Now, the 4 families represented here, when we reached out to them, none of them were, with one exception, none of them were interested in talking, but there's also a couple of substantial subdivisions nearby. There was originally opposition from the Ramsgate subdivision. We've had significant discussion with them, and as long as there are certain conditions, they have just agreed to, as I understand it, support it. I believe Mr. Schultz has some correspondence from them. Is my understanding that another subdivision, Frontgate, initially had some concerns, and those are, as I understand it, essentially worked out, but I don't have anything that's documented yet to be able to demonstrate to you that the Ramsgate neighbors are now okay with everything. The second dynamic is really somewhat unrelated to the issues of the specifics of the zoning request, and that is a potential business situation with my client that could moot this and change dynamics completely. I am in no way representing that that will happen, but it is something that's on the table in his personal life.
Thank you.
And I do understand that that my client has reached out extensively with his commissioner as well, and has had substantial discussions. So it's not like we've just been sitting on this. And in terms of the timing of my notification to them of our request for a deferral, I believe that went out at approximately 8:15 a.m. this morning. It was not late this morning.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
More of I guess, an administrative question. Does it make more sense to maybe just withdraw this?
The applicant certainly could withdraw it. Councilman Ledford.
Oh, Chairman, I just wanted to reference in our packet was a letter stating on behalf of approximately 50 homeowners at Frontgate that basically conversation had been ongoing and that conditions made this, I guess, more palatable or really put restrictions onto the requests in general. I just want to make sure that was noted for the record. I see Mr. Dugan has referenced that, but we do have a letter from Frontgate neighborhood, which states on behalf of 50 homeowners. So,
And I have not seen anything from Frontgate. Well, maybe I'm confused between Ramsgate and Frontgate. There's 2 subdivisions. It's my understanding that one letter was submitted and another will presumably be on the way. Is my
we have one from Frontgate in our packet, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have a motion to defer for 60 days, and it has been properly seconded. Staff has recommended this case be denied, and the opposition's here asking that it be denied. Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry, we have not voted to defer it yet?
We have
thought-
not.
I thought we had.
No, we have a motion and a second
Okay,
to defer it.
so we can vote on this
60
case
days.
if we would like.
So we're taking action on a motion to defer for 60 days. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? So is it unanimous? Okay, there's 2 no's. Is that right? Raise your hand if it's no. All right. Motion carries.
Thank you.
It's deferred for 60 days. Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say to the opposition that came, I get the hardship it places on y'all having to come back down here. I can't speak for the entire commission, but if you were unable to make the next meeting, I will at least personally remember that. And it'll be the same as if you were here. So thank y'all. Thank y'all for coming down.
It failed earlier to introduce somebody that's new up here, Dan. Dan Reuter is our new city planner and has the honor of being secretary of the Planning Commission, which is just a fantastic job. And so this is his first Planning Commission meeting. So you just got to see the best of it right there. Yeah.
Good afternoon to everyone that I have not met yet in the community. I look forward to meeting you, and I'm very happy to be working here with Chattanooga and Hamilton County. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the introduction.
Glad you're here. All right, next case on the agenda. See, I'm in a good mood again already. So, well, I mean, let me just clear up a couple things. I mean, and we can push it to old business, but I want to have a discussion about the merits of a deferral and why we would do that. And I think they need to be rare, to say the least. So if maybe somebody remind me when I'm exhausted towards the end of this meeting that we do need to have that conversation. First item under new business is a mandatory referral 2022-0018. It's located at 4017 W Road, and it's an application to rezone from R2 Urban Residential District to A1 Agricultural District and has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, that's not an MR. We screwed up on the agenda. It says MR right in front of it. I'm gonna blame Emily.
That would make more sense. It's not my fault. I didn't
I'm
write it.
blaming Emily. We apologize. It is
a
rezoning.
You raised your hand in opposition? Okay, and is the applicant present? All right. We'll hear from staff first.
Sure. This is case 2022-018, request to rezone from R2 Residential District to A1. You see on the screen, this property is zoned R2. To the north is R2. To the south is R2. To the east is R2, and to the west is A1. So really in this area, you have A1 and R2. There's been no recent zoning history for this particular piece of property. In 2013, there was a request to rezone 200 feet to the west for a PUD for 32 units. And it actually was in the town of Signal Mountain. This property is currently vacant. To the north is single family and vacant land. To the east to the side is single family and vacant land. And to the south is single family and vacant land. And to the west across the W Road is single family and vacant land. These are large lots with single family dwellings on those. This is a view of the site from the W Road, showing you the sign. This is a view looking down the W Road. This property is in the Waldens Ridge Plateau Area Plan, which was adopted in 1997. And the plan recommendation is conservation residential, which recommends that states that growth pressures are greatest in this area and recommends that woodlands, open spaces, and creek habitats need to be preserved. Inconsistent development should not occur in this area. The plan also outlines environmental public health policies as well. Staff reviewed this and request is compatible with adopted land use plan. It is compatible with adjacent land uses and it is compatible with development form. In order to prevent nuisances to adjacent properties, staff recommends conditions limiting the uses in the A1 zone. This rezoning is necessary because the R2 zoning district does not permit accessory structures on a lot without a single family dwelling. In this case, is a barn. The A1 district allows accessory structures without a single family dwelling on the lot. So staff recommends to approve, subject to one condition: minnow hatcheries, dog kennels, retail farm stands, and boarding stables shall be prohibited. So staff recommends to approve the request from R2 to A1 with one condition on the uses.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff? While Councilman Ledford's asking his question, can the applicant come on up to the mic? Councilman Ledford.
Chairman, thank you. Brian, in an R2, what is our density? And if you would also if we were to convert it to A1?
This is in the county. So
Yeah.
R2, if it's on septic, it's 25,000 square feet per lot. So you're looking at two, basically on septic.
Okay.
It's on sewers, it's 7,500 square foot per lot, which is about 4 to 5 dwelling
4
units.
or 5.
A1 restricts you to 2 dwelling units max, regardless of septic or sewer.
Okay,
Does that answer?
it does. Thank you. Chairman, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, we'll hear from the applicant. State your name and address, the reason for your request.
Hi, my name is Chad Hazelwood. I live 3901 W Road. Recently acquired this property. What I wanted to do when I cleared out the underbrush, I found a shed that had been crushed by a tree. Wanted to replace that with a new barn, tough shed barn. They told me I needed a building permit. I went to get the building permit, was denied because there's not a house on the property already. So pursuing the rezoning so that we can go ahead and get the replacement barn and start the garden. So that's it. So happy for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer.
Yes, sir. You, it sounds like you have no problem with the condition that staff recommended.
No, I appreciate the support.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from opposition and then you'll have, you can stay right.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned your address and I didn't listen and I don't even know exactly. Are you adjacent to that? Is that a lot?
No,
It's
sir.
adjacent.
3901 is
Okay.
about 6 or 7 properties further
Gotcha.
down.
So you're not adjacent. Fair enough. I just wanted to ask that question. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Dax Turner, and I'm at 4109 W Road. This is a friendly opposition. I was just wanting to find out what the property owner was going to do with the property. It does border my property up above, so I wanted to find out what his intent was. And then we're actually considering the same rezoning for our property, so I really wanted to see what the process was. So this was a fact-finding mission for me today. And just to possibly even give the property owner a recommendation, maybe getting the property surveyed before continuing to develop the property to make sure that he stays within his lines and not encroach upon anybody else's property. Property lines on the W Road are not established. So just want to make sure that everything was heading in the right direction and just to find out exactly what his intent was with the property. And that's it.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve with conditions and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you both. Don't forget, you'll have city council or county commission. The second?
Yes, 16th. I think it's March 16th.
Do y'all still pass that out with all those?
There
dates?
should be some back there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0020. And it's located at 107 South Germantown Road. And it's an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to RT1 residential townhouse zone with conditions. It has staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chairman, we skipped number 2, which is case 2022-19. So we go ahead and act on 2020 and then come back to that one, or?
Yeah, I skipped it.
Yeah. You're in a good mood. You just skipped on.
Yeah. I just, when you have a staff recommendation to deny C2 convenience commercial zone and approve C5 neighborhood commercial zone, I'm like, just skip it. Now we are on case 2022-0020. Is there any opposition? You're here in opposition. And is the applicant present? All right. We'll hear first from staff.
Okay, this is case 2022-20. This is out in Brainerd area off South Germantown Road. This is a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to RT1 residential townhouse zone with condition. That condition was supplied by the applicant. Garbage pickup shall be limited to occur only between the hours of 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Again, this is currently zoned R1. To the north, immediately abutting this property is R1. If you go about a block and a half to the north, you do see some R3 that's just off the screen. To the south of this property is R1. A little further, one property further south is R2, which is being used as a single-family dwelling. To the west of this site is R1 single-family dwellings. And to the east is R1, which is also single-family dwellings. Just the northeast at Audubon and Germantown, you see there is one little spot of R3 zoning sitting there. But generally in this vicinity abutting this property, it's all R1. There is no specific zoning case on this property. However, in 2003, at 111 South Germantown Road, adjacent to the site, there was a request to rezone from R1 to RT1. This was denied by Planning Commission and City Council. In 1981, 32 South Germantown Road, there was a request to rezone from R2 to R3. Staff recommended to deny. Planning Commission and City Council approved, and that's just to the north off the screen. Also in 1984, there was a request to downzone a parcel in Glendon Place, approximately 855 feet to the west of the site from R2 to R1. That was recommended for approval by Planning Commission and City Council. And then finally in 85, that's 25 South Germantown Road, which is further north of the site, about 460 feet. There was a request to rezone from R2 to R3, and that was approved. This is a vacant piece of property. To the north is single-family dwellings. If you go further north on Germantown Road towards Brainerd, you do start to see some multifamily developments mixed in. To the west is single-family detached dwellings. To the south is single-family detached dwellings. And to the east is single-family detached dwellings. This property is about 1,300 feet to the south of Brainerd Road. Here's the view of the site from South Germantown Road. Another view of the site from South Germantown Road. There is no land use plan for this particular piece of property or this area, so we fall back to the comp plan, which was adopted in 2016, and that plan is based on intensity levels, being from 1 to 5, with 1 being the least intensity to the highest of 5. Level 5 describes development potential appropriate for infill and redevelopment that is urban and walkable, with the most potential for future public services. So it's important to note there is no adopted land use plan to provide guidance in this area as being inappropriate for the introduction of a new housing form, i.e. attached units. The proposed townhouse uses are not compatible with adjacent single-family residence. However, there's a multifamily residential use on South Germantown Road about 370 feet to the north of the site. There is no land use plan in this area to provide guidance on increasing density or changing the development form in this area to permit attached housing. The parcel is mostly surrounded by R1 zoning. The immediate surrounding parcels include large single-family homes on large lots, and proposed townhouse uses are not compatible with adjacent single-family residences in the area, so staff recommends to deny this request.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right, Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mike Price, MAP Engineer, 7380 Applegate Lane. Mr. Chairman, I'm surprised that you're ever in a bad mood, given the fact that you can go from being bald to having hair, unlike the rest of us that can't do that. So my compliments.
You just cheered me up. Thank you.
So the request is for 7 townhouses on the subject property, and his staff has mentioned this is a level intensity 5, which we do meet, and there is a need for varying housing types. And if you looked at the aerial photograph that staff provided, you do see multifamily is just essentially on the other side of Audubon Drive to the north of us. I would also point out, if you look at the zoning map, immediately south of us, there is R2 property, 1 parcel beneath us. And then to the east of us, we have R3, which is at the corner lot there, or at the intersection of Audubon and South Germantown Road. So we think that given this particular location, and given that this is an infill, which is appropriate for what we are now seeing more and more occurring in the city, that this is an appropriate use for this property. We have sufficient parking. We've addressed stormwater. We have a 10-foot landscape buffer that goes around the perimeter of the property, which if this was developed as R1, you would have no landscape buffer that would be provided at all. So we've also have had conversations with Councilwoman Ms. Coonrod from this area, and also conversations with several of the neighborhood leaders. So I've not heard from these particular gentlemen as far as what their concerns are, but certainly like to hear those and see if we can hopefully address those concerns as we move forward. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer at this time.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. As the pattern you probably guessed, I'm going to ask, you have met with Councilwoman Coonrod or had discussion on this project?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Okay, and I know that I did as well, and I know that she is in favor of providing housing opportunities for people in her district. So what class landscape buffer? Is it C?
This is a type C, which is evergreen trees planted at 10 feet on center 2-inch caliper trees. So typically my heights are a little bit greater when they are initially planted. Typically about 3 years, you get a pretty good stand about 10 to 12 feet, depending upon the type of planting material and then screening that would then apply as far as that growth continues to go.
Okay. And in R1, there is no landscape buffer.
That is correct.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Farmer?
Joe, I'm looking at your site plan. It looks like kind of a parking lot and then walk to your townhouse.
Correct.
And then that backs up right to that parking area backs up right to an R1 area. Is that right?
So
there's a structure there.
There's actually an unopened alley to the west of us, and then R1 there that is on the other side of that unopened alley.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is if I'm pulling in that parking lot, pulling in the parking space at night, are my headlights shining to a single family structure?
There is a carport in the adjoining house. Yes, that would be mitigated by the stormwater management area, but mainly by the 10-foot type C landscaping that would be installed. But there could be looking at maybe a site obscuring fence could be done there as far as dealing with lighting. Good point.
Yeah, I think to pass this along with my support, it makes some sense to put a fence there.
Agreed.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else before we hear from the opposition? Councilman Ledford.
I apologize, Chairman. I should have asked this earlier. Mr. Price, what is the height restriction in your request?
There
for
is
RT1. Is it 2.5 stories, 35 feet?
2.5 stories is allowed in that particular zone. Yes, sir, which is 35 feet.
Okay. Are there any, can you tell 2.5 story structures nearby? I mean, I know we have a lot of topography.
I did not do a reconnaissance in terms of looking at it in that lens. So I don't know exactly what is in around in terms of height of structures.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, staff, I believe for most parts, all 1 stories. That R2 zoning extending to the south, that is a 2-story structure. It's a little bit larger. It's about 2 stories with multiple structures on that lot. But generally abutting this property, it's all pretty much single story.
Hear from the opposition, and then Mr. Price, you'll have an opportunity to speak again. Come on up. State your name and address for us.
My name is William Green. I live at 111 South Germantown Road, which is adjacent to that lot. My driveway runs right up beside it. There's 10 homes that surround this lot, established families. This gentleman makes it sound very pretty, but this is right in the back doors of houses, our houses. I don't see how that lot could support what they plan. It adds too much congestion right there at that neck, bottlenecks, Germantown Road right there. I'm against it.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Councilman Ledford.
Yeah. Before you speak, can I ask you a quick question, sir?
Yes, sir.
I want to just make sure I write in my notes. So your objection is you don't think mechanically the project is viable?
It just don't fit that neighborhood. That's a 100-year-old historic neighborhood. All the houses in there were kept up to the historic standards. The latest house built in there is the one I reside in. It was built in 95. It was built to strict standards. There's nothing in there that takes away from that neighborhood. And the multi-units he's talking about is blocks away from there. They're not close like it sounds. And 10, like I say, there's 10 houses that go around that lot, and every one is right in their door. This will be a big disruption to the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Frank Meyer. I'm at 102 Vista Drive. I'm in the Glendon Place community, which is directly behind this particular request. 100-plus-year-old area. But in looking at where this is, it is sandwiched in between three other homes, actually, single-family dwellings. Now, if you do go north of there, on the other side of Audubon, there is apartment complexes, Chateau, Chateau East and Chateau West. But if you go towards the interstate, which is, that's heading south on the west side of the road, there is no, I'm not aware of any duplexes or any type of townhomes on that west side heading towards 24. There are several single family home dwellings that people have bought and have improved the property. This particular property would come but right up against my property at Glendon Place and tower over the backside of my property. So I just don't see any improvements. I understand we need, more housing, but there's affordable housing through there. These older houses are being fixed up and improving the value of the property, other properties throughout that neighborhood. So I just think it just detracts from the neighborhood. I plan to circulate a petition in the Glendon Place in this particular area to oppose this type of rating from an RT to an R1.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for opposition? All right. Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Schultz, I do have one quick question. This RT1, which I think was the same zone we saw earlier, does it hold 6 or 7 units per lot? Or, but what we're looking at, I'm surprised that, I know we're not making our decision based off this site plan, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, RT1, it's based on minimum lot size for townhomes. And that's 1,350 square foot for townhome or 2,625 square feet for a single family dwelling.
But does it require subdivision of the property? Or
it does not. You can do, on that site plan, that's not a public road. In order to have subdivision off that, each one of those lots would have to front a public road. Based on the zone, you can do a basic private drive, if you will.
Gotcha.
Here. And again, staff's biggest concern with this, there is no land use plan to provide us guidance on should this area transition to more attached housing units at this location.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Mr. Price.
Thank you. Don't have anything to add from what previously had been stated. Again, we think that given that this is an infill, this is an appropriate use and plan, and we're providing the proper landscaping. If there's any questions, be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Price?
I have a motion.
Oh, okay.
I just have a motion, no questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
I can't count how many times I've heard Chairman, well, I know we need more housing, but we need more housing. I move approval.
We have a motion to approve. And it has been properly seconded. Mr. Farmer?
Yeah, yes for affordable housing, and I want to support your motion. I do feel pretty strongly about adding that condition for the fence.
I'll accept as a friendly amendment.
All right, we have a motion and an amendment that a fence be added as a condition. Is that right? Got it right?
Yeah, and Brian, you can work on it, but basically a fence across anywhere in the parking area that would limit headlight exposure into the neighbor's house.
To that one house that you're seeing on the, I guess, the right here. That's the only area you're talking about.
Yeah.
We'll work something up, and then I'll send to the applicant, make sure it's what he works with them.
We've got a motion to approve, and we've added an amendment, and it has been properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am curious, it's just, I can understand why Mr. Anderson made the motion. I certainly understand that, there's a need for housing, and I'm a huge proponent of that, by the way. And I can see the condition. My concern is that, when we have these cases where staff is recommended to deny, and we make a motion to approve. For various reasons, we do this from time to time. And, we're taking a zone that is not currently there and we're introducing it. And while we don't love conditions, we do have the opportunity to have conditions to make sure that something like this does fit as well as possible in light of the fact that we need this additional housing. And so I wondered if it might not be possible for Mr. Anderson to instruct staff to consider any necessary additional conditions that might be brought under consideration when this goes to council, just to address those potential concerns. The earlier case that, our chairman got so irritable about was all about density and how many units could go on it. We didn't have any discussion about density. We didn't have any discussion about trash service. We didn't have any discussion. It was like 15 things that we can talk about for an hour each that we didn't have any discussion on. And we just introduced a completely new zone into that neighborhood. And hopefully that discussion happens at council to make sure that, what we're doing here is not in any way, shape, or form a detriment to the community.
Chairman, if I may respond, I'm aware that discussion is going to happen at City Council next month, which is why I'm comfortable moving forward with this and putting it in the hands of the elected representative of District 9. And I think that if anybody's interested in the zoning code assessment, we did release that at council in public last week. So it is available on YouTube on the City of Chattanooga's YouTube channel. We are going to be looking at all of these zones and looking at greater density and more modern zoning solutions to some of these things we're seeing today in terms of having to add a lot of conditions to make a zone work. And instead, we're going to have within about a year or so, a lot more options and solutions.
That's great. Thank you. All right, backing up, we've got item 2 under new business on our agenda that I accidentally skipped earlier, and it's case 2022-0019. It's located at 3619 Fifth Avenue. And it's an application to rezone from R1 to C2. And staff has recommended to deny the C2 and approve C5. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chairman, we did receive opposition letter. They're not here today. That's a pretty lengthy letter, but basically boils down to parking. The applicant opened this business up next door without any permits. It had illegally been operating for several months. Sounds like one of the main issue is this customer's parking is occurring on their property, which is also zone C2. So they're watching today, so it's part of the record, their opposition.
But they're not here.
They're not here. They couldn't be here.
They're
today.
just watching online.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be glad to read the whole thing, but it's pretty lengthy if you.
It sounds like a private matter in regards to where somebody's parking, right?
Yes.
Okay. And is the applicant present? All right. Do you mind coming on up to the mic? I do have one question for you before we hear from staff. Can you state your name and address?
Yes, my name is Alicia Sebastian. I reside at 3718 4th Avenue.
Okay, we have a staff recommendation to deny the C2 request and approve
Yes, sir.
a C5 neighborhood commercial zone. And I'm assuming you got that staff recommendation in the mail
Yes, I
about
did.
a week ago. Do you have any concerns or questions in regards to the
No,
staff
the
recommendation?
only concern I had was if I probably could get signatures for like the resident who's are living on the other side of us. They said it was okay for us, It would not disturb them to have noise or anything. My husband, who is here with me today, he is the homeowner. And he is here with me today, but the only concern was if maybe we can get signatures from the persons on the side of us, since he does know the homeowner of the person who is living next to that other side.
And when you're asking about the signatures, that's just to address the parking?
No,
Or for some
like
of the-
for the disturbance or noise.
Oh, okay. Got you. But you're okay with the staff recommendation for C5?
Yes, I'm okay. I would
That's great.
accept the C5 for that.
Okay, fantastic.
Mr. Chairman, it'd probably be good to make the applicant be aware. There's another step. If the C5 is approved to get the restaurant, you'll have to go through the Board of Appeals to get a special permit.
Do you understand that?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
But we have not been operating ever since we had inspector come in, since I did not know what was all needed.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Mr. Farmer.
Is Brian, is C5, that's the zone you can't sell alcohol into, right?
That's correct. It's more of a neighborhood type.
If we could just point that out to her.
Yes, I'm not planning on to sell any alcohol.
Thank you. What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve the staff recommendation. And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And you did understand what Mr. Schultz was saying about needing to still get special permit to have a restaurant in that zone? Okay. Okay, thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0021. It's located at 4000 Tennessee Avenue. And it's an application to rezone from R4 to M1. I'm sorry, it's an application to rezone from R4 and M1 to UGC. And the staff has recommended that it be approved with conditions. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present? And are you familiar with the conditions? And do you take any issue with them? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve and thank you. We have a motion to approve with conditions, and it has been properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, I'm gonna step out for just a moment. If you could come get me.
Okay.
Unless you want to just.
I'm going to chair our meeting in the short term or going forward. And so next on our agenda is item 2022-0022. It's located at 7610 Goodwin Road. It's a request to lift conditions, has a staff recommendation to approve lifting conditions and add a new condition of residential uses only. Is there any opposition in the room? The applicant present? Okay. And you're aware, I'm assuming you're aware of the conditions, and do you have any issues with the conditions? That's a no. Okay. I have a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item. No, go ahead, Chair.
Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0025, and it's located at 2378 Chestnut Street. And it's an application to rezone from M1 to UGC. And it has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0026. It's located at 2378 Chestnut Street, and it's an application for deviation from building height and mass requirements in UGC. And this case has a staff recommendation to approve the building mass deviation and approve a modified building height deviation. Is the applicant present? And is there any opposition present? Well, I want to make sure that.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't see the applicant raise his hand, but
They did.
Okay, they're probably opposed to the recommendation.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I know we've got a motion. Okay. I do want to make sure we have the opportunity to hear from the applicant. And there wasn't any opposition present, right? Okay. And while the applicant's coming forward, I would like to hear the staff's perspective on this.
Sure.
In regards to more than anything, the modified building height
Sure.
recommendation.
I think this is tied to the previous case you all just heard, cases 25, which is to rezone this UGC. Staff's okay with the building mass and recommend approval. It's the building height. The applicant's proposing 7 stories. UGC has a limit of 4 stories in the height unless you get a building deviation from Planning Commission. Staff, look, there's a bunch of 1-story buildings nearby. However, looking at the land use plan, which is the South Broad land use plan, which was adopted in 2018, this is in the mixed housing high intensity level, which lists 5 different conditions or policies, if you will. And policy number 2 states allow buildings up to 5 stories in height. That's where staff's coming from based on that land use policy, which went through a public hearing process back in 2017, 2018, limiting heights in this general vicinity to 5 stories. So that's the reason staff recommended to deny the 7 stories and keep it at 5.
Thank you. Oh, for staff, Mr. Farmer.
On your zoning history, Brian, it doesn't say, or am I just missing it? What was this part of that mass rezoning?
No, to the, where we did the UGC corridor,
No, I'm confused. I'm sorry.
No, it was
That, yeah.
the Broad Street.
It was to the east of this side, the east and south.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kirby Yost from Chambliss Bonner and Stoffel. I represent the developers and they're also behind me. We're not all going to bombard you, but they're all here in case you have specific questions for them. Russ Morris and Jefferson Hawley here are the developers, and they also have their architect and general contractor behind me. Just a brief kind of restatement of the purpose. It's mixed use with some commercial on the bottom and mixed multifamily above, which we think and understand is needed for professionals in the downtown area. The reasoning for the request on the height deviation is because this lot is oddly shaped to begin with. The dimensions are pretty tough, especially as you go towards the south. It's very narrow. And then on top of that, there's a cell tower nearby. And for safety reasons and compliance with financing requirements, we cannot build anything within the fall radius of that cell tower. So it limits what we can do on that site. And a little bit more detail on the plan. 2 of those 7 stories would be for structured parking to meet the parking requirements. And then I'd also note that the developers have spoken with and met with Rakita Dotley from the City Council District and have spoken about the plan. We've also asked whether she's heard from opposition so we can try to connect with anyone that has interest in this. And as far as we know to date, there has not been any, but my clients are here to discuss with anyone if they have questions, and they're here now if you have questions as well.
Councilman Ledford.
Chairman, I know we had a motion. Okay. I've been following this one very closely along with Councilwoman Dotley and understand the conditions as outlined for the property and understand why they've requested 7 stories, and it makes complete sense, especially in this area, given the conditions of the lot. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the deviation with the building height and the mass requirements from UGC with the 7-story.
We have a motion to approve the applicant's request. Right? I mean, it's just plain and simple, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0027, and this is located at 810 Cedar Mountain Road, and it's an application to rezone from R1 residential zone, R2 and O1 to C2. And staff has recommended to deny the C2 and approve an R4 special zone. Is there any opposition present? Is the applicant present?
Yes.
And can you come on up? So you've gotten the staff recommendation and you're familiar with it, I'm assuming. Are you okay with it? Not okay with it?
I just got some questions. So my goal is to have an office space with my financial planning business and maybe a estate planning attorney and the CPA or something in the bottom floor, and the second floor a 2-bed, 2-bath apartment. I spoke with the lady in the back that seems like that would work for R4. Is it?
I mean, that's what, I guess, Brian, just to be clear, you know what it is he's looking to do, right? Based on what he just said?
I think that's the first time we've heard about the residential.
Okay.
At least I have.
That was on the site plan.
Yes, in R4, you can do offices, professional offices, multifamily, single family, so that would allow.
Okay.
It's not either or, it can be in conjunction, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. But on the,
Is that better than 01 for what I'm looking?
here's the site plan that we received. Because at one point we had a discussion, or you had a discussion with our staff about doing commercial strip center and retail. That would not be allowed in the R4. R4 is primarily going to allow you to do office and residential.
And is it the same as office as having 2.5 stories?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Is it staff's recommendation that that's better?
Well,
use?
staff has recommended to deny C2.
Okay.
I mean, I guess we could hear from staff on all the reasons for that, but it sounds
most
like.
are R1. I mean, it doesn't. If I can do what I want to do, that's fine. But there's two other owners on either side. I'm only buying one lot, and there's 9 lots, but 3 different owners. And so I just want to make sure that if I can do what I want to do, I'm good with it. But I also want to maximize what they could potentially do in the future under that zoning, just to be a good neighbor.
Well, that will set a precedent. So.
Yeah, I would say as far as staff goes, C2, as you heard today from consultants, there's a lot of uses allowed in a C2 without knowing what that eventually will be. That's why staff is taking a more conservative approach of R4, which allows you to have your office use and the residential as part of that. It won't allow you to have retail in there. So I think you're mid-block somewhere. I think you're out through here, perhaps, where your proposed business is.
That's correct.
So again, a portion of this is 01. Staff did talk about this case quite some time because it does about, major corridor going up to Signal Mountain Boulevard. I do have C2 and C5 to the southwest, and that's why staff was taking more. There's not a land use plan for this area either that provide guidance. So we just fell back to more of a conservative approach of looking at R4.
And it's next question. So on if I get R4 for mine and the 2 gentlemen that own the lots on either side of me, one's already zoned R1 to the left and one's R2 to the right. If they have opposition to R4 and leave it as is that going to create landscaping buffers on either side of me?
Yeah, it's part of this request too. I mean, it's all part of this request.
I would prefer not to have to spend money to have landscaping buffers on the right and left side of me. If we're all going to end up being office space at some point in the future, if that makes sense.
We're a bit out of order. So let me try to straighten it back out. So hold on one second, Mr. Farmer.
So, Brian, first of all, he asked for C2, and you can't have residential in C2, right? You can't.
You can't have residential. C2 allows a lot of things.
Okay. For some reason, I thought you couldn't have. Okay.
No, you can.
And then is the 01 is a broader zone than the R4 special zone. Is that right?
01 would be more restrictive.
It's more restrictive.
Yes, in terms of uses. R4 would allow the flexibility of having the office use that was out on the application. It doesn't allow the retail. That's one of the difference between R4 and C2.
But in 01, he can have an office use with a residential component.
It says single family dwellings. I'm not sure he could do retail on bottom, office on bottom, and residential on top because it says single family dwellings. I'm not sure they'll allow that.
Okay. I thought we had done that before.
I'm looking for
I've got a question for the applicant. So you see this map we're looking at?
Yes, sir.
That's the property that is being discussed, being rezoned. All that property right there. Okay. And so when you're referencing neighbors and having concern for neighbors, it's the R1 that's behind that property?
No, so I'm buying one lot. So there's 9 lots there. It's all in the red. I'm buying the one in the middle. There's 3 on the right side of me that one guy owns. One owner owns my lot.
And then the other 5 lots to the left and around the corner is owned in a family trust by like 15 different cousins. And so the goal was rezoning it all at the same time. So that way we didn't have to have landscaping buffers between the properties, and we could do a shared parking agreement so we can maximize the space.
Yeah.
And with C2, I could put the building right up to the property line instead of having to have 10-foot landscaping buffers like I would with an R2.
And then,
So that's my concern with R4 is, can I still put the building on the lot line and not have to have landscaping buffers between other properties? Or does it have to be O1 or C2 to get away from that?
It's all R4. You would not. You'd have to have setbacks from the property lines. You couldn't just put it right on top of the property line. A lot of those are codes enforcement issues that we can't answer.
So O1 though could be on the lot line and C2 can be?
No, a C2 would allow it, but
Okay.
O1 and R4, you still have setbacks.
Mr. Maybe.
I guess I think getting to the question I believe you may have been leading to, but the way I understand is he's rezoning property on either side of them. Do these people know that their property is being rezoned?
They signed off on it.
So they've signed off on.
Oh, yeah, all 3 owners signed off, allowing me to rezone it.
Okay.
Okay.
And we submitted that with the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
But the issue may be that they're not here to make a decision at the moment, and that's your concern, is that your application was for the C2, which
Right.
they were on the same page with. And you didn't have the opportunity to review the staff recommendation with
I didn't see that.
property. Oh, okay. The staff recommendation.
I didn't notice that until I picked it up in that box back there in the back.
Okay.
And so I sent it to my contractor, I sent it to both owners.
Right.
And let them know what the R4 was. And so that is my concern is R4 sounds like it's fine for me. But if it creates, it's a more costly problem that if R2's on one side of me and R2's on the other side of me, and I got to spend money to have landscaping between the properties, and then they come in and they change it to, one of them's already O1, the ones that go around the corner is O1 already. And then there's like a tiny sliver, like a third of that property. You see that where that orange on the upper side, see right there, where that blue line is? So that tiny sliver is zoned R2, and the rest of that orange is R2. And so that one lot, just because there's a tiny sliver that's R2, creates a landscaping buffer. That means I either got to put trees or a fence or something up between the properties. That just makes it more costly. And if we're all rezoning it, if they're okay with R4, sounds like I'll be fine with it. But if they're not, then I would prefer to have C2, so there is no landscaping buffer, and we can share parking and.
Well, as much as I'm remiss to say it, I do think that you should request a deferral, and you should come back with some sort of understanding of what the property owners are okay with or not okay with.
At least, if I'd have got that in the mail, I would have already discussed that with them.
They mail them out.
We email to the email on file the application. Are you the applicant representative?
Yeah, the email on file, Emily Wood should have updated because it changed December 31st.
There we go.
So there's the problem.
Okay, yeah, we email it out to whatever's on file.
But so if we go ahead and say I'm good with R4, and then can they come back and change their minds? Do they have a say?
We could take action today on the staff recommendation, approve R4, and yes, you could discuss it with the property owners. For whatever reason they had concern, you would need to make sure that those concerns are addressed at city council.
Okay. Yeah, let's go. I'm good with R4 then, because that actually improves the O1 from what I've heard today and heard from them. So
he's not asking for it.
It's not.
He's saying he's okay with the staff
Chairman,
recommendation.
can I jump in?
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Knowing the chairman whose district this is in, probably not going to lean on C2. So I would make sure R4 is, you have the authority to accept that.
yes.
Okay. And if something changes with R4, if that motion were to pass, I would highly recommend, if you have not already, reached out to Chairman Henderson.
Okay.
Because I can tell you C2 from an R to a C2 that's going to be a big problem.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd entertain a motion to approve the staff's recommendation. Mr. Maybe.
I guess this is a quick question for staff. Brian, can you tell us how that process works of, when somebody signs off to allow another person to rezone? Give me a little background on that. I have a little reluctancy to move forward if not everybody necessarily knows what's happening to their property. So.
Sure. When somebody comes in, if we're not the property owner, we have them sign a form with the property owner to sign a form giving, this case, this applicant the ability to apply on their behalf to rezone. We'll say this, he's right. There was a lot of property owners involved in this. Emily went through a lot of discussions with the applicant, trying to get all the information. It went on about a month and a half, just trying to get the information together on this site to make sure that we have everybody's authority to process this zoning case.
So does it give them just a free pass to do whatever they want after that point, or is it for a specific rezoning request?
It doesn't really say I'm seeking to include my property in the C2 request. It says I'm hereby giving Mr. Poole the authority to represent me in a zoning case.
Thank you.
It's my understanding that the owners could also come back and say, hey, I'm opposed to this prior to the council meeting and come talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, once it goes to council, anything could happen now. I mean,
It sounds
they
like
could
R4 is an improvement for every property there, and C2 wouldn't get approved anyway, so we might as well proceed with R4 is my opinion.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant? What's the will of the commission?
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Even though the chairman wants
For the record, there's no motion to defer. There's a motion.
Oh,
to
I
approve.
withdraw that and move to defer.
And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0028, and it's located at the 8,000 block of White Cypress Trail. And this is an application to rezone R2A to R1, single family, and it has staff recommendation to deny. Is there any opposition present? You're here in opposition? And is the applicant present? All right, Mr. Schultz.
Okay, this is case 2022-28. This is a request to rezone from R2A Rural Residential District to R1 Single Family Residential and off the Snow Hill Road in Uttawa. It's currently on R2A. Everything around this property is R2A. To the south along Kittrell Lane, you see on the zoning map, there's A1, and then just beyond that to the south is R1 PUD. But in this general vicinity, everything is R2A. This is a request, again, to rezone from R2A to R1. There is no zoning history on this particular piece of property. However, to the west of the site, in 2017, you see on the zoning map this big, large, vacant piece of property. In 2017, there was a request to rezone that R2A to R1. Staff recommended to approve. At the Planning Commission, there was opposition. And the County Commission, there was opposition to that rezoning request to go to R1. And ultimately, that was denied. And you can see on the screen the site plan or subdivision plan, what that's going to look like today when it's developed. Adjacent to this property to the south, 2004 and 2005, just to the south, we do have several requests to rezone from R1 to R1 with a PUD with a density of 2.11 dwelling units per acre as a condition. Here's a closer view just showing you where zoning is in this general area. If you see the R1 to the south, which is Hampton Cove, that was developed as a PUD, R1 PUD with a density limitation of 2 dwelling units per acre. That was developed on sewers. Since that time, that zoning case that I was just talked about a few minutes ago that was denied by the County Commission, sewer lines have been extended along Snow Hill Road and along Kittrell to that development. All this Savannah Hills Drive was developed at a time on septic tanks. Just to show you some density and adjacent developments near this vicinity request. Again, the preserves in Savannah Bay, that's a density of 3.1 dwelling units per acre, proposing 56 dwelling units. Hampton Cove, PUD to the south, that's a density of 2.1 dwelling units or 100 units. The village of Savannah Bay is to the southeast. That's 4.69 dwelling units per acre, or 20 units. And Baycrest is just a small little development to the south of this site. That's a density of 3.79 or 13 dwelling units. Just remember, in July of last year, the R1 single family development zone standards were amended to change the lot size to 6,000 square foot. Minimum frontage was changed from 60 to 50, and the front and rear setbacks were reduced from 25 to 20, and a side setback of 5 foot. Just for comparison, the R2A rural residential district standards are 7,500 square foot lot size, minimum frontage of 60, front and rear setback of 25 foot, and a side setback of 10 foot. Just to show you what these developments look like, we overlaid the site plans on top of an aerial map just to give you some perspective. The one on the left-hand side, which is the preserves of Savannah Bay, again, that's being developed as the current zoning of R2A, has a density of 3.1 dwelling units per acre, or 56 total units. And the one on the right-hand side, the applicant provided a site plan. It was not required as part of the zoning case, but we reached out. He did provide a site plan, and it's showing 31 units with a density of 3.69 dwelling units per acre. This is a vacant piece of property. To the north is single family. To the south is single family, large lot single family. If you go further south, again, you get into the single family subdivision of Hampton Cove. And then to the west is a single family that was developed under septic tanks. So then you can see in the middle, that brown area, that's being developed with a single family subdivision on sewers. Here's a view of the site from White Cypress. Another view of the site. This is a view of the site on the right-hand side on White Cypress looking towards Snow Hill Road. This property is in the Wolf Beaver Creek area plan, which is adopted in 2007. It goes on intensity levels, and the plan recommendation for this parcel was low intensity residential. Although conventional R1 zoning with a PUD may allow up to 5 dwelling units per acre, this density is not appropriate for the transitional growth sector. The plan sets a threshold of 3 dwelling units per acre, has been found as general acceptance from local residents. So the density in the low intensity is 3 dwelling units per acre or less. Just for comparison's sakes, on the R2A as the existing zoning, developer provided a site plan with that as well. Under the current zoning, the developer can get 29 units. That's a density of 3.6 dwelling units per acre. That's based on lot frontage of 60 foot, minimum lot size of 7,500 square foot, setbacks of 25 foot on front and rear, and a side setback, which is compatible with adjacent dwelling units on either side of this development. R1, again, it's 31 dwelling units, 3.7. You do have smaller lot sizes and smaller setbacks. So staff looked at this. The existing R2A district allows compatible development form in terms of lot size and front, side, and rear setbacks. That helps protect the prevailing low-density single-family residential form in the area. The applicant submitted plans that show the potential to develop 29 lots in the existing R2A zone. Proposed R1 would introduce a much higher density with reduced setbacks into the area, which does not meet the intent of the Wolf Beaver Creek area plan, again, which is low-intensity residential. Although the applicant is showing mostly comparable number of lots, staff is recommending denial of the R1 district as proposal is not compatible with the existing neighborhood. Neighboring development form, which includes lots that range from 7,000 square foot to 32,000 square foot in size. Number two, the existing residential setbacks. The change of zone allows a change to the pattern development in an area that primarily developed on septic or developed at an overall lower density with 7,500 square foot lots at a minimum on sewer. Developing under the existing R2A zoning found in the surrounding area promotes a consistency of development form that will help maintain the rural character of this area. So staff recommends to deny the request to go to R1 in this location.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right.
I'm glad you're happy. Joseph Ingram, Ingram Gore and Associates, 115 South Level. This, Brian actually did a great job. He kind of every point I was going to make, Brian made. We're not making a dense. This is not a density play. It's an infrastructure play. He put up both my maps. We basically have identical. I actually have 30 taps approved right now. So 30 taps, whether it's R1 or whether it's R2A, it's just, you see that one there? I've got to build more infrastructure to get the lots. But, you know, the other one is just, I would stack them on a single road. And then we actually had some discussions with some of the neighbors about purchasing some of the land on the bottom so they could be further buffered. So the R1 allows them to do that. But we have absolutely no intention of being in any kind of fight. So if there's really hard opposition, we will withdraw the case. I mean, we don't, this really was not, I promise you, it's not about density. It was just trying to minimize the infrastructure and build lots that are what we're doing in America now. I mean, we're not, 7,500 used to be a big lot. It's not anymore. But I'd like to hear the opposition. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this case in particular, I made a lot of notes on while I was on the airplane last week. This one grabbed my attention for a couple of hours. And what you just said, Mr. Ingram, was interesting because I'm trying to figure out what the request was or why the request. When I start looking at, because you're not going, usually there's a max density you're trying to achieve.
No,
you're not trying to achieve a max density.
It gets too steep.
It's too steep. Yeah. And I was looking at that. And so that was my biggest question was why the request?
Just stay off the slope, stay out of the rock.
So in an R1, which is now obviously 6,000 versus the old 7,500, are you staying off of steep slopes?
Yeah, we'd stay up on the top.
We stay on the
Brian,
top.
can you put up, that was the existing zone.
It's a little hard to see on there. You can sort of,
Yeah.
right through here. It's hard
But
to
in
see.
an R2 as is, let's just call it as is, you're intruding onto steep slopes.
I'll have to do more work, but obviously I'll grade, but I can't go too far. I just, I've got a number my client needs to get out of this property. So I would have to build that little cul-de-sac where if I do the R1.
But either way, you're getting 31.
30 is what WWTA has given me.
So you have 30 taps. That's what you said. Okay. So give me just a simple breakdown. 30 taps. What happens in R2A? What happens in R1 regarding steep slopes?
So I would be forced to do some grading. I mean, we don't run into steep slopes. We run into slopes that are greater than Mr. Lehman will appreciate this. Then I'm not over 30%, but I'm over 15%. So my roads, I've got to do a lot of grading to get roads in. I'll have to do some cut and fill to get the cul-de-sac up.
So R1,
we won't be on technical steep.
I'm trying to break this down to absolute simplicity. In R1, less grading?
Absolutely. Far less.
Same number?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
We'll hear from the opposition unless there's any other questions.
I have a question.
Commissioner Martin.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ingram. You had mentioned that you weren't aware of any real opposition to this. Did I hear that right?
No, I actually haven't heard anything, so I'm not unaware or aware.
Right. And I guess my question, have you spoken with Commissioner Highlander about this?
I have tirelessly tried to. I have had zero luck getting together with, I have another case that I've had no luck with either.
Well, I'll help you with that.
Thank you.
We'll hear from the opposition.
Hello, my name is Chris Mahan. I live at 8157 Savannah Hills Drive, which is a continuation of White Cypress. White Cypress, if you turn off a Snow Hill, you're going straight up a hill. When it makes a big turn back to the right, which is where this development's going to be. And once it makes that turn, the road changes to Savannah Hills Drive, which is where I reside at now. And you guys have approved a subdivision earlier. If you could pull that picture, I've got some old school pictures here I'd like to pass around to you. That subdivision right there, the preserve at Savannah, I bought a house across the street from that. When I came, the planning commission signs were there. I was told it was denied. There would not be anything built there. And then all of a sudden, we've got, I'm going to pass these around. This has been this way for over a year now. Old subdivision Most of all of the tracks going around this are over an acre track. And I also have right here on I don't know if you can play this on a flash drive, of what this development has done to my property in my backyard. If you can play this. Property, which I've been on the phone with your engineers at the Hamilton County. I've had every Hamilton County commissioner on the phone with what they've done to my property. And I'm trying to save the people that live down below this property because it's going to do the same thing to his property. You can't take all this rock out and you can't just take all the trees out and expand. And if any of you boys live in Uttawa by chance? I should just be able to say one word, and that's Snow Hill Road, and you deny this. Because I don't know how many more houses you're going to put off of Snow Hill Road without extending it to a 4-lane. Because the traffic out there, you can't even get by at night. You can't get by in the daytime when you're going to work, when you're trying to go home. There's no infrastructure to support any more cars on Snow Hill Road. And if you guys want to come out and ride home with me, I'll take you to dinner. We can go see how it works out. And if you can get that video to play, it'd be great.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to your point, I'm familiar with Snow Hill. Yes.
That's one of the dangerous
Living
roads
in
the county.
Yeah, living in East Brainerd, I have Davidson, so I understand about bad roads. I really do. But to your point, what you're in the denial, they have a right to build there, as you know that, right?
No.
Whether or not we go R1 or we don't go R1 today is not going to stop them from making application to the county.
Okay.
And if you're looking to stop development, that's not what we're doing here today. We're discussing R1
So what is
versus
this?
R2A. And
He's contacted no one in the neighborhood.
and if
No
you
one knows
if you heard me,
anything about
yeah,
what's
if
going
you
on.
heard me earlier, the density is capped. He's already been approved through
Okay.
WWT. I'm not arguing for or against this project. I'm just saying I want you to understand that this is not a body that's going to squash a development. That's not what we're deciding today. That's not our charge. There are other agencies past this that will make
When
decisions.
did it pass it without any kind of notification?
Sir,
When was it passed without any kind of notification?
when was what passed? Today, the case before us today, if you're referring to, and the chairman may want to address this, if you're referring to a case that is not in front of us right now, we're not going to discuss that case.
I think maybe what you're asking is why is it possible for him to build a neighborhood there right now?
Correct.
Because it's zoned R1
Yes.
and you can build neighborhoods in R1.
Okay, it's always been zoned.
It's
R1.
always, well, not always, but it is currently,
R2A.
I'm sorry, it's zoned R2A and it can be developed as a neighborhood right
And
now.
sewer was extended.
So whether or not it's, I mean, what Councilman Ledford's kind enough to explain to you is that whether or not it's voted up or down today does not change whether or not
It's okay.
it can be developed.
Okay. Well, I'm just here to give you my opinion, and most of the neighborhood, most people can't come to this because they have jobs, so.
Sure.
But if you can't get that to play, I do have it. Is there any way you can hook my cell phone up to it? Because I really would like.
Could you just real quick tell us what we would be able to see if we watched it?
Oh, you would see my backyard being flooded in 1.5 2 foot of water from this, and it's all on video running off of this one development. And I spent 7 figures on this house and never would have done it if I knew what was coming.
Sure.
I mean, you can't even go in my backyard when it rains. You're talking ankle deep water. And it's on a big rain, not just a normal rain. But I mean, if it were your property, I don't think you would have it.
Sure.
I'd really like for you to see it. And to right now, the problem has not been fixed.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have had the county, like I said, nothing seems to be getting done.
Okay. You feel like you've been heard?
Have I been heard?
Yeah, heard.
Heard, yes.
Okay. Do you have anything else? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can we just ask if he wants to leave us the video or whatever, or leave your name so we can contact you in the future. But make sure we have your name and phone number.
No, you're good. Mr. Ingham, go ahead.
I think it's just the same point. It's not you're right. We're going to do 30 lots, whether I've got to build, 1,600 feet of road or 1,000 feet of road. I mean, that's the density we're going to do. We're going to just grading, and obviously I'm familiar with grading in that area. And so I know what it's going to take. And so this was strictly just a try to have less infrastructure. But if we don't have any intention of making anybody mad. I mean, it's not, I don't want that fight. But I think you guys can see what I'm trying to do. And if you want to condition it, maximum 30 lots, that's what I worked out with WWTA. I'll just answer questions.
All right. Mr. Maybe. Oh, Councilman Ledford.
I'm nodding to Commissioner Farmer.
Mr. Farmer.
I think this makes a lot of sense. I may have some comments at the end of this meeting about this case, but I think it makes sense with what Mr. Ingram has said to approve R1 and limit it to 30 lots.
We have a motion to approve with conditions. And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Councilman Ledford.
I want to thank you for coming down because Snow Hill, Davidson, several roads in Chattanooga are under scrutiny very heavily and rightfully so. I hear you. This commission hears you. The RPA director has met with Commissioner Highlander and not to put words in his mouth, but has taken the tour of Snow Hill, Uttawa, Georgetown Road, and is very aware of the challenges. We have the same thing happening on Mountain Creek Road in the city of Chattanooga, where we've asked RPA to do a corridor land use plan. And I think that without speaking for the RPA director, but I believe that that request has also been made for Snow Hill Road. So your action here, your coming to us means a lot. And I thank you. It does make a difference. We hear you. I just, and just to solidify what I was saying to you earlier, I think what you were looking for, this is not what we do here. This was a simple case of R1, R2A. And my comments to the applicant was to find, because I'm a very strong advocate of steep slopes and development in the city and have written legislation to address that, is I was finding the best way to mitigate and to stay off disturbing the land as much as possible, because I do understand that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Next case on the agenda is case 2022-0029. It's located at 7503 Igo Gap Road. And it's an application to rezone from R1 to RTZ and has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? You're here in opposition? Got you. What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is a mandatory referral. Now I don't trust now I'm looking to see if it is actually.
Oh, these next four, they're all correct.
All right.
We're allowed one a month, right?
Yeah. Mandatory referral 2022-0031 for right-of-way closure has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission? Motion to approve. I need a second. Has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case is mandatory referral 2022-0032. And this is for another right-of-way closure on the 1500 block of Polk Street. Has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? What's the will of the commission? We have a motion to approve. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2022-0033. And this is also the 1500 block of Polk Street and as a sewer easement abandonment. As a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2022-0034. And this is for a right-of-way closure of 1400 Broad Street. This case has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present? We have a motion to approve. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We have a time on the agenda for staff updates in regards to RTZ and UGC zones.
I'll turn it over to Karen.
It is on. Les, and you have a handout, so I'll be speaking from a handout I gave you. Last month, Councilman Ledford mentioned some UGC requested amendments for staff to review, and then he sent those to us. And so today what I'm going to do is give kind of a general overview. They are not prepared for, if it's an ordinance amendment. But I also believe there's someone here that would like to speak to these, and someone out in the lobby also might be interested in speaking to them. So I was just going to kind of, there's 6 or 7 main points. I was going to kind of do a quick overview on those and then turn it over to Alan Jones, I think would like to propose some language or speak to the matter also. So just going through this quickly. So Planning Commission to determine what kind of guidance they would like to give staff moving forward. Staff reviewed these as understanding we have a zoning code rewrite coming, but we also have the UGC zone, which was one of our tool that we're using a lot to produce a lot of urban residential housing, and it's a frequently used zone. So we do understand that there are some things in there that might not be working as well as could be. So we kind of took that as a balance. The first request, so the code language is on the left. That's just the code language from the zoning ordinance. In the middle is the requested change and then staff response. So I'm not going to read the staff response, but just kind of hit the highlights. The UGC does not allow a 2-family or duplex unit. And that was a request was to change language to allow a duplex. Our response is that we recently amended the RTZ zone that allows up to 4 units permitted. And then we made the setback changes to the RTZ. So we're hoping that a better RTZ tool will supplant the need for the change to the UGC. This isn't a real strong opinion. I think we just feel that the RTZ and the changes we made is going to produce the tool that will allow that duplex development. And originally the UGC is, using it for 2 families, really kind of getting away from its original use. The second is the UGC requires a pre-submittal meeting. Staff supports removing that language that was in there. I think when the UGC was a new and different tool, now it can just follow the normal development process. That's a very reasonable request. The third request is to add a deviation section to allow more deviations to go in front of Planning Commission. Right now, for UGC, you can do a mass and building deviation. You saw the one today for the South Broad project, and allow some auto-oriented use deviations. The intention is to is not intended that that process supplant the Board of Zoning Appeals. We understand that there needs to be more flexibility. I think today you heard in the presentation from the consultants, maybe administrative modification process. We do want a better tool, but this was just not something that we would, it's not intended to send everything that needs a variance really in the UGC zone to Planning Commission at this point. Just the ones we have in are intended to be that way, and the rest should go through the Board of Zoning Appeals. This is something that we'll need to work through as part of the zoning code rewrite. That's just kind of our comments at this point. I'll go through them all and then we can talk about them if you like. The next few are landscaping, and this is really, I think, some of the heart of what brought this to the attention. Brian and I have received or been part of quite a few landscaping variance type emails regarding the UGC zone. I will say probably when we amended and put the UGC zone into the zoning ordinance originally, we probably did not do a good cross-check with the zoning ordinance and the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And then we've amended the UGC, and I think it's probably compounded the problem over time. So some of this is we do kind of have a UGC is not completely addressed in the landscape ordinance and then has standards of its own. One of the requests was to shown there talks about change to intentional public space and articulations within the building footprint. And speaking to the city's landscape coordinator, we just kind of worked on some language that we would propose, and it could be that our development partners that are here today could take a look at that and give some feedback, but basically changing from landscaping edge when there's there's not a building fronting the lot to landscaping when no building is present within 15-foot setback to give a little bit of wiggle room there, but also if the building articulation language was somehow needed and felt to be needed by developers, then that was something that can be added. The landscape coordinator did not have a hard opinion either way on that one. We do, thinking about the additional language, although not requested or part of this request, working the landscape coordinator noted that right now buffers are not required in the UGC zone except where a property line is shared with any residential zone or any property with a single family detached use. UGC zone is being used for a lot of residential products. So a possible consideration, again, this is just kind of a discussion, knowing some changes need to be made, is that it could be landscape buffers are not required except when a property line is shared with a single family detached use. So again, trying to be a little bit more flexible. That wasn't requested by the, as part of this review, but noted that might help. The third one talks, I think there's two things going on here. One is removing language that says tree planting area. The landscape coordinator said if it helps, calling that a tree or shrub planting area, but the landscape ordinance reference there is the tree planting area. So unless we developed full new standards for that, didn't see a value, if we understood just correctly, removing that tree language. And then again, this is talking about site modification deviations from Planning Commission, which is what I mentioned earlier. We understand that there's kind of the Board of Zoning Appeals allowed what's under state law, and then there's a lot of other needs. We would rather work that out through the zoning rewrite process. And then lastly, this UGC is not in the landscape matrix. So I'm sure that was an inadvertent oversight by staff when UGC went into the ordinance. We do need to somehow address that. The landscape coordinator proposed a change, adding a footnote that that the UGC standards actually prevail over some of the landscape ordinance standards. That's in a different table, but that might be something we need to talk about a little bit further. But she did agree that there is some missing information there. And because we do understand that, I think Alan would like to speak. I don't know if Donna would like to speak. That's kind of where we're at. They can probably tell you why this is a problem for them, and then if you would like to give staff guidance from there about how to move forward. But overall, we understand. I think there is some circular references. So if we fix one, we need to make sure we're really looking at both of them pretty closely so we don't create more of a problem than what we have now.
Thank you, Karen.
Karen, great summary. Appreciate y'all giving me an opportunity just to kind of touch on some of the, I guess you can say, challenges with the current zoning ordinance as it relates to doing urban infill. I think there was a comment earlier this afternoon, we're trying to increase density, especially in the urban core. I think my discussions are really more focused on the within the urban overlay zone. I don't know if these may be as applicable outside the urban overlay, but also UGC is mostly being used on the urban overlay. Every now and then we see a few cases for UGC going outside of that district. But kind of give a few highlights. I guess a few months ago I was here. We were rezoning a property from R3. This is on 26th Street, and South Broad LLC. They own the majority of the properties in this area. It's all R3 right now. We rezoned to UGC just because the lot's only 25 feet deep. And I think I even asked this board, can we actually get rid of the landscape buffer condition? They said, well, we can't actually downgrade with conditions, but we can always add more. So we did go to Board of Zoning Appeals, and we got shot down essentially. Our lot's only 75 feet deep. Long story short, they either couldn't find a true hardship because they said, oh, you rezoned your property from R3 to UGC. We're like, well, R3 has a 25-foot front and rear setback, so our home is only going to be 30 feet deep. I don't know many builders that can build a good quality townhome that's 30 feet deep. But the way the UGC ordinance is written right now is it states you have to have a 10-foot landscape buffer between any UGC use or any UGC zone and any any residential use. And what triggered this is the property behind us is R3 with 2 duplexes on it. So you got 4 units right behind us, but we're having to put a 10-foot landscape buffer basically between equivalent uses. And then you go to the landscape ordinance, and the way the landscape ordinance reads is if there's a compatible zone adjacent to you, your buffers are not required. So there's a little bit of a circular logic between UGC and the landscape ordinance. But I think it's later on, and I think item 7 in the landscape ordinance says, but if there's any conflict in the code, the landscape ordinance presides. But city staff in the land development office took the approach that because UGC was written after the landscape ordinance, the landscape clause that the landscape ordinance takes precedence did not apply, since UGC specifically says you have to have the landscape buffer. So I have 2 recommendations. One, so the original C3 language, which has already been vetted out, the way their setback reads is it says a side yard of not less than 10 feet shall be provided where a non-residential permitted use adjoins a residential zone. The side yard not less than 10 feet shall provide where permitted residential use adjoins an R1 residential zone or other single family detached. So what that does is in the UGC, it allows us to basically eliminate that 10-foot buffer if it's R3, R4, or any other medium density kind of dwelling. Talking to a lot of planners, developers, talking with RPA and staff, the idea of forcing buffers between like use developments just doesn't make sense when we're trying to build community, we're trying to build good quality infill development. And to touch on the UGC with the articulations in the buildings, it basically kind of kills architects' creativity. If we have any kind of undulations in the buildings, if it's not 0 setback, we have to put in a street edge, and that street edge is prescribed as a evergreen screen. So I can't even, as a landscape architect, can't even look at creative plant material, looking at native grasses and other, kind of good planting options. It's this very hard prescribed definition of how we have to treat them, because we're working on some townhomes that's UGC right now. Porches, you have a little bit of a jog for a little landscape bed, next building, a little bit of porch, but those little landscape beds have to have this prescribed evergreen screen, and it's just bad design is what it comes down to. So that's the recommendation I would have y'all, if y'all could look into, is looking at allowing some design and some maybe creativity when it comes to how building articulations work. And also in the urban general commercial zone, whether it's commercial or residential zones, we try to do some urban plazas and things like that, have a nice transition zone. But those require a 3-foot landscape edge. You can do a wall, but from a cost standpoint, most developers will just throw in a little landscape hedge around their little plaza. It's not really a good way to invite the public, into some of these more urban spaces that we're trying to create. So I think that's kind of the main points, other than I think what Karen already touched on. So thank you for your time.
Councilman Ledford.
Thanks, Chairman. So Alan, before Donna comes, we've been using UGC a lot for a tool for urban infill. And I think what this has come out of, and I've had a lot of conversations with you, Donna, other engineers, Rocky, Todd, Mike, and others, and I've learned a lot. And hopefully I'm listening, because when I brought these forward, it's because we're finding not only inconsistency that we hope to fix down the road.
Right.
As I look to my right, at Mr. Anderson. But I think this helps us forge that path forward, because if we're asking you all to do certain things, but then you can't do them because we have a conflict, then I think it's our charge to try and fix them. Even as we start to develop this new zoning code, it's going to take a while. We're not going to have this overnight, and projects are going to suffer. So I appreciate you coming and sharing that information with me, and the commission for letting me share it with you. So hopefully we can allow this transformation to happen that we are asking for, and that's provide housing for opportunities in our city. So.
Well, thank you for that. And also, the recommendations that I've, sent over to Councilman Ledford and to Karen, these are, I think, easy minor tweaks that could be made. Obviously, I think the city's goal is to do a brand new overhaul in the ordinances, which I think is much needed at this point. But these would hopefully be some minor tweaks without major ramifications, I think, that would help kind of in the interim to help spur on, continue on spurring on good development for urban infill. So,
yeah, and we certainly don't want to step on our own feet as we try to move forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Donna.
I want to reiterate some of the things that Alan said, and I apologize for missing the beginning of Karen's presentation. I'm not sure if you spoke about the open space, but before I get to that, I had a similar case that Alan had that was going to go to Boza. We had a case where we had an R3MD, which is a fairly medium density zone, and because of the setback, it was rezoned to UGC. We had a case where on one side of the property, we had a parking lot for a church, and on the other side, we had a commercial business. And so we were going to be required to have that 10-foot landscape screen on either side. And so we spent quite a bit of time conversing between the two of us, and we're hoping to go strengthen numbers to Boza to try to make our case that the zoning code was not quite there yet. The RPA was working on it, but we needed some help. Somewhere in there, ours was next to an R4. And so it was determined that the R4 was a special zone, and they withdrew our case. But we were pretty much set up to have the same fate as Alan with the, what do you say, for the rezoning or for the Boza case. We have another project that we're working on that is a master planned development that is in the urban overlay off of South Holtzclaw. It was rezoned to UGC. It's kind of been slow moving along, but we do have some areas on a new public road that's being developed where we would like to have some open space. And so we also have had the problems with the building articulations, but we also want to take into consideration areas that are planned to be open and visual and pedestrian friendly. We're planning on doing some of our sidewalks at grade And wherever there's not a building, you're going to be required to have that street edge. I understand fronting the fronts of parking lots to block the screen of the lights and everything. But we would like to have, if not when we rezone or have some type of deviation process on a case by case basis. I kind of like it to Miller Plaza. Could you imagine having a street edge? I know it's not UGC, but could you imagine going all around Miller Plaza and having street edge everywhere? It just doesn't make sense. So when you're trying to have that public interaction between the properties where people are moving about, that's something that I would also like to be considered with this UGC zone. What did you say about the street trees? I didn't quite catch that. Where you've got this, UGC requires the street trees, and then there was that parking lot edge where there's that second row of trees. We did also consult with a prominent landscape architect in town, and they've tried to argue that having class 1 trees that close together is just too close. It's redundant. So it's kind of either one or the other. And I think we prefer to have them on the street edge if we can. That's all I have.
I guess if there is a desire from Planning Commission to address some of these, I guess I could summarize what I heard, and then you can give some guidance. I don't think we probably touched on all the items that Donna and Alan mentioned. I think we've got a lot of them, but I made a couple notes, and I can confirm that they might be separate issues. But moving forward with landscaping changes, I think there is a true, it is not clear. I think there probably is something we need to look at there. Removing the required pre-submittal will just free up some time and allow projects to move a little bit quicker. And I guess if we can hold off expanding the deviations section right now, if we can maybe get the landscaping right, and then we could move forward with those changes. I think the deviation section, I mean, we just want to make sure we're compliant with state law, and we're not, and that's one. What does staff review? How does that look like? I would like to hold off for that unless Planning Commission would like us to move forward and allow a, expansion of requirements of the UGC to go, before Planning Commission. But otherwise, it sounds like perhaps moving forward with landscaping changes and removing the required pre-submittal. I can send what we have to Donna and Alan. I think they've been coordinating with some of their peers to kind of say, this is what we have, this is what I heard, confirm that. And move forward with some potential changes to present to you all if that is your wish.
Hey, Karen, on the deviations, what specifically is your concern with making a change to UGC such that, the items that are going before BOZA are being turned down with probably no real, I don't want to say that there's no real consideration, but it's a different level of consideration because it's just that quote that, hey, you created the hardship, so the answer is no. It's just what BOZA does for whatever. I think they feel like that's what they have to do. Seems like if some of these things could be deviations at Planning Commission, then there could be greater consideration given to the specifics, which is not happening at BOZA. Is, hey, this is a residential property next to a residential property. This is R3, this is UGC. Should we require a 10-foot landscape buffer or not? You have the opportunity for the neighbor to show up and hear the concerns that they might not have. What was your concern with having a change that would allow for those deviations to flow through Planning Commission until, there can be maybe a permanent fix?
I'll start, and then any RPA staff can join in. I think just first of all, we're trying to put our energy and time towards the zoning rewrite. I think second, I would think we would want to confirm state law is what sets up the Board of Zoning Appeals to give some power. So just to make sure we don't have a mismatch with Planning Commission acting as not a variance board as a deviation board. I think would just be, and that might just be a simple check. And then third, I think the case that we heard today with the height variance, like in that one, we were able to defer to plan. The plan gave guidance, sometimes massing guidance. Some of these items, an articulation or an open plaza, staff's just not going to have I don't think have anything to fall back on to provide guidance. I don't know if we create a checklist or something new. This was just kind of our first pass at trying to move things that are kind of low hanging fruit on. But I don't have any other comment unless a staff member somebody else from RPA wants to join in.
No, I think I agree with what you're saying. I think the biggest thing is checking the state law, see what the planning commission can and cannot do in terms of these deviations. And then the same thing that Karen echoed too, is like, what would staff and plus you as a planning commission be reviewing to review these deviations? That's the challenge.
And if I understand, and I agree with Karen and Brian, if I understand what we're saying is that we would like to have something in the code that gives us clear direction, even at an administrative level or the planning commission, about what kinds of deviations we could accomplish. Because I agree with that. There are things that I think we probably should be able to be review and without having to, without impinging on the BOZA's responsibilities. But having said that, I think I agree with Karen. I'm ready to move forward with something. Other changes.
We'll take a guidance.
Chairman, I make a motion to direct RPA to pursue landscape and the pre-submittal language changes and present to Planning Commission next month.
So we do have a motion in a second. Any discussion? Would it be possible to add to that motion that RPA research the whole question in regards to deviation?
Chairman, I think that would be.
And just get back to us with some specifics.
Very acceptable amendment. Thank you.
Not long ago, I don't remember what it was, but we took a bunch of stuff back from BOZA.
Those were special permits.
Okay.
For the county. So those weren't variances.
No,
though.
okay. Special permits.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
And then staff also, you'll be seeing something next month or so. County Commission, I think, is taking up this week, correct?
I would defer to Commissioner Martin when short-term vacation.
Short-term
rentals.
vacation rentals right now, they go in the county, they go special permit from Planning Commission, ultimately County Commission. Talking to Commissioner Martin and the County Commission, we feel that should amend this, let the Planning Commission be the sole authority on short-term vacation rentals. It's like the single wides. You can appeal it to the County Commission. I think there's 13 or 14 approved in the past year.
So real quick, you've shifted gears, but we do have a motion in a second on that.
Sorry about that. I jumped in that. Sorry.
And the only thing that was added to it was
Getting a little nervous, Chairman. Thank you.
the request that staff also get back to us on the questions in regards to deviation.
We will get back on that.
Any other discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. In regards to short-term vacation rentals, I guess you're going to be.
We'll bring something for y'all next month, a month before, a month after that, just depending on the County Commission, if they take it up this week, directing staff to process an amendment, just making y'all aware, they're probably going to see an amendment to change that process.
And one more quick thing, what we were just talking about were changes to UGC. Alan had brought those, but were we going to have any discussion in regards to RTZ? And was there any discussion in all that UGC about it allowing single-family detached, since it is being used as an urban? I mean, was that at all in the, I mean, are we done talking about that whole point?
No, we can, the changes we got were UGC changes, so that was probably not a second error, but I think that was just, we were thinking there might be some RTZ mixed in with that. It was just UGC, which was provided to us. And if we were not requested to look at removing or adding single family residential detached to the UGC.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think Alan and or you could say that RTZ does the same thing that UGC does in regards to landscape buffering and that sort of thing, doesn't it? I mean, if you have an RTZ development, which is single family attached,
right,
and you were to put it next to R1, would you not be required to have a landscape buffer? You would.
So so RTZ doesn't have a specific landscape buffer requirement within its ordinance. It just references you to the landscape buffer chart. And low density versus low density doesn't require buffer. It's that high density versus low density. And there's really not even the landscape chart doesn't even reference really medium density, which is really kind of we're starting to look at are these 10, 12 unit townhomes.
Okay.
So RTZ doesn't necessarily force you into that buffer except for a single family use. I think RTZ would probably trigger a 10-foot landscape buffer, which is probably appropriate, honestly. Because if I have and we've heard some of the cases today, if I've got a single family home that I've been there for 20 years, and all of a sudden we're starting to pop up a bunch of townhomes around me, it might be nice to have that, to respect, to kind of respect that R1 zone. And I think that's been a precedent that I've seen over the past 10 years here in Chattanooga is that, we want to respect and protect the R1 neighborhoods. From a political standpoint, they're your long-term voters, just to be honest. And that's why we see so many of the R1 neighborhoods being protected. And I don't necessarily think that would probably be something that would be removed is taking away some of those protections against the R1 neighborhood.
Okay.
So
anything else on that?
Just real quick, I want to thank RPA staff, everybody for putting in the work on these changes. I want to thank our partners in the development community for bringing them to our attention, but also having the conversation with us. I think this is how we're going to hopefully set the pace for writing a new zoning code for the city. And it's through conversation, collaboration, and I look forward to maybe getting more things accomplished in the near future. Right, Mr. Anderson? Right. That's right. Very good. So thank you all.
Mr. Farmer.
Can I bring up a new topic, please? I mentioned this when the case was being heard earlier. The R1 case we spent a little bit of time on, and I want to preface this by saying I have massive respect for our staff. I have massive respect and the amount of work that you put into these meetings and the way that you look at these cases, and Brian, especially the way you interact with us is fantastic and super professional. And I say what I'm going to say with a tremendous amount of respect for you guys. But when I don't agree with something, this is the format. There's definitely been a change in the way that there's definitely been some changes in the way that a staff report is providing R1 cases since the R1 changes have been made. Today there was it showed literally the old R1 standards on one side and then the new R1 standards. I think there was a slide reminding us what the new R1 standards are. And I could go on. And certainly it's not my place to tell the staff what to report. I'm just providing feedback. But I feel like the legislative body of this county changed what R1 standards are. And when the legislative body changes what R1 standards are, I think it's changed. And especially when there is sewer provided to a site, I think it's even stronger of an argument. And so I think everybody here knows my point, and I'll wrap up. But I just hope that maybe we could all take this and think about it, have a conversation about it, because the rules have changed and there is new R1 standards. And I think we as an organization need to embrace them. Thank you.
Mr. Lehman.
Yeah, I wasn't going to touch on that. I got two other things related to that. Well, one of them related to that case, but let me only say this. And I think it is important to, and I understand your point, but you would not understand the amount of calls we get relative to 10-foot and 5-foot setback. So I do think for a short period of time, it is important because community character matters to a lot of people that come up with opposition. So I'll only take up for staff relative to continue, at least for the short term, to communicate that difference, because it's in the mind of everybody that comes up here on community character. You make a great point on sewer, and I understand 100%. Savannah Bay or Savannah Estates was done on septic. So there's a large range, and an R1, whether it was a year ago or an R1 today or an R2A, is going to look a lot different. So I agree with that point 100%. Let me transition to the point that the gentleman brought up, because I think it's pertinent to some discussions we've had in this chamber relative to requests. I have not talked to that gentleman. Those usually get elevated to me when they say, I want to talk to your boss, and then I get them. So I got a really good, competent staff that deal with a lot of that. So I have not talked to him. I probably will, and I'll follow up. But we have had a discussion, and I would almost, and I'm going to talk with Lisa afterwards, I would almost probably say, if you remember, we've had a couple of civil site engineers come up and say, we don't like having to provide all of the engineered design for new subdivisions prior to preliminary plat, even though that's what it said. And I will be the first to say that fault on our end. We set up an expectation for a long time in the county, just rolling these things out. But my comment continues to be, and I've said it, and I just want to reiterate it because I think today was a really good example. The subdivision regs do say it. A land disturbing water quality permit, one person, one department looks at that. And so what happens is, and I'm not sure in this case, but somebody with a land disturbing permit starts a project before it's gone through the engineering design and before this body has an opportunity to actually deliberate that project, that subdivision. And that gentleman does have an opportunity to come to a public meeting. He can come back to this meeting, whether this R1 that we just did would stayed R2A or R1, and Mr. Ingram went and pulled a permit to do it. We would have required him to go through the engineering design. He would have known. I guarantee that developer that started that other subdivision probably ran into rock with sewer and probably couldn't finish it. It is a liability for those property owners. And I don't know what we've done relative to that, but that developer obviously started with probably without all the engineering design, without a really good idea of what they potentially getting into. And as all you know, or most of y'all, I mean, you all know, because once you start grading a site and it's under construction, the water quality subdivision regulations are a 2-year storm. Is all you got to do in a sediment basin. So I would guarantee that site stripped with sediment ponds that were in a land disturbing permit. And we've had a tremendous amount of rain over the last couple of years. I think last year or 2 years ago was highest on record. He's probably getting more water on his site now than he did 3 years ago, because that developer went out and so we've really tried hard, and RPA staff has really, really done well. And the subdivision regs really say it, although we set up an expectation that says you got to do all your engineering design, because you got to know how many sewer taps. You got to know what your sewer looks like. You got to know everything. We've got FEMA rules and regulations. We've had things start when the FEMA, because land disturbing is one department, and we've got a multitude of departments that review that aren't under my authority. So when they come and say you're gonna hold us up 11 days or 30 days because you want all the engineering done before preliminary plat, so this body can have a deliberation on a project, major subdivision in Hamilton County that provides additional public infrastructure. I think when we let projects like this one get started before that deliberation with just a land disturbing permit, before all the engineering is being done, and before a deliberation in front of this body to say, yes, that preliminary plat is acceptable. It protects, human health, safety, welfare. We've heard your concerns, but they've met all the permit requirements. They've got a design professional stamping the plans. We didn't hear anything from you or from any expert that says otherwise. So I want to come back to that discussion because Mr. Price has brought it up. I think Mr. Blackwood has brought it up, and I think it's very pertinent. I don't know exactly about that case, but those are the kind of cases we're trying to make sure don't happen, and we don't leave large scars on properties that are going to adversely impact adjacent property owners. So I thought it was a good time to mention it because I think that's still out there. We fight that a lot from a development perspective. We have no intention of slowing down development, but we do think it's important for the public confidence, for this body and their deliberation to have all of that done prior to that. So I bring that up. I'll talk about Snow Hill Road, but maybe I shouldn't. I won't talk about Snow Hill Road. Thank you all.
Commissioner Martin. Yeah, I understand, Commissioner Farmer, exactly what you're saying. The decision, the verdict has been rendered. It's time to snap and clear and move on. That's what I'm hearing you say. And I get that. But I would say this, that if I'm not mistaken, and Mr. Schultz or Karen, one of y'all could correct me, this case will be the very first case that will come before the county commission. So even though the law has been changed or the rules been changed months ago, this will be the very first one that the county commission. Am I correct?
That's correct. We had one, Uttawa, Georgetown Road.
But that was
that was R1 and a PUD. This is the first case out the door that's strictly R1. And I was sitting there trying to show R1 standards and the R2A, because it was a little confusing to staff in this case too. I think Councilman Ledford hit on the head. Why are you zoning this? If you get the same number of units,
right?
Why are you going through it? That's what I think I was trying to get across. Like, it's really about the setbacks, infrastructure issues. It may not come across that way, but that's what I was trying to show with different standards.
And my point is this, is that one up on Uttawa Georgetown Road was really about an A1 PUD. It wasn't about density.
Right.
And this right here is going to be one where you're going to have 30 taps regardless. So it's really not even the first clear A1 farm we're turning into R1. Now, what is this? How is this different today than it was a year ago? So I hear what you're saying, because I'm all about when something's decided, let's move on. And I get that 100%. But I do think there's some context to what you're saying on that. So thank you.
Councilman Ledford. Chairman, I want to echo what Mr. Lehman said, because when we pass something and the land has been disturbed and something does not follow through without the proper engineering, knowing like whatever the case in that particular situation was, as the elected representatives, we're the first people to hear the complaint. And we're the first people to have to look at people and say, oh, well, that's a civil matter, because that's what it ultimately ends up to be. So I think whatever we can to do to ensure that we make the right decisions with that engineering, I think is pretty doggone important to people, because when government, whether it county, city, or whatnot, basically looks at people and say, that's now a civil matter, their water's on your property, we leave people hanging right there by the thread, and I think that's unfair. So I think I appreciate what you said, Mr. Lehman, about the engineering aspect, because the end result is we're making a pretty big decision. And if that decision doesn't pan out, then it's the public and other property owners that suffer. Thank you.
And I'm going to add very little to this, but other than to say, when Karen and Brian and I discussed this, I did want to be very aware that this is the first time we had this request, and that I want to be consistent in how we approach it as a staff when we get these requests in the future. By all means, there's sewer there now, and that's important. The second thing is just to say, we are talking about Snow Hill Road. I did have a good drive, and I understand the issues there with the commissioner, and I've talked to Todd, and we're going to continue to try to figure out how the planning office can work with the county to address not just Snow Hill Road, but other roads in the coming years. Third thing is, I would just say that, and I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but Commissioner Highlander was not aware, but we do not send letters to adjacent property owners on a rezoning in the county, but we do in the city. And so he kind of made the request that we consider doing that in the future too.
I thought we did. We don't send letters rezone.
No,
300.
No, we used to. We years ago, because of the cost of that, we cut that out. In the city, it's required to only notify the ones who are abutting. That's not the county.
So no reason we require posting, but no mail outs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for example, on this White Cypress, where the sign was located, I don't know if a lot of people saw that sign, to be honest with you.
Okay. Let me bring up Snow Hill now that Dan did. So, because I was spending some time during the UGC. So let me tell you about Snow Hill Road. The crash rate's high because we've got some vertical horizontal topography, and people go too fast and people are distracted. That's chronic. That's an issue everywhere. But we requested a safety audit from TDOT because they're professionals and we rely on them. Safety audit in 2015 came back, no action, a few little signs. We requested another one in 2018, came back with about $320,000 worth of a little bit of shoulder work and some other areas. So the annual average daily traffic on Snow Hill Road, just north of Forest Creek, is 3161. Now down in Publix in the city, it's about 6,900. So a 2-lane section being traveled at the posted speed is adequate for 3161 annual. Now, granted, are there peaks? Yes. But I was telling Dan, we put it, I think TPO is going to put it in the long range transportation plan because I've been hearing so much about it. We're concerned about roads like that. We look at roads like that in it's an illustrative project currently, or it's going to be illustrative in the 2045, 2050 RTP. It's about a $30 million just to add shoulder and add continuous left turn lane, middle turn lane. Now, we've continued to try to improve roads in the county with development. I get a lot of pushback on that too. If we want a traffic impact study or we want the developer to shoulder that, we're going to try to start partnering on maybe some of those. I've got some requests from developers. I don't know what that looks like, but we're concerned about any road where we have high accident rates. I get every fatality sent to me. If we have a fatality, and we immediately start looking at, was it geometry? Was it engineering? Was it something? The majority of those are distracted driving or speeding or under the influence, unfortunately. So we take that very seriously. I only want to say, and I've told Commissioner Highland this, I told Dan the other day, we're continuously looking at those roads. But we've got 3161 as our annual average daily traffic. And so that 2-lane section, at least from a capacity, maybe not at the intersection. But anyway, so thanks for bringing it up. We continue to look at it.
All right. I got a couple other things. I do need, just to say it, we have time on the agenda for public comment. Is there any? There's nobody here. Can I get approval of the Planning Commission meeting minutes? All right. We have a motion and it was seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. All right. I'd like to go into executive session. Can we turn off the feed and have staff exit?